Hi, Shabbat Shalom, everybody. Shabbat Shalom. Welcome to congregation Beth Tefilah, also a Kahal Elohim, a congregation of the Most High Elohim. This is our numero dos. This is our second time that we've been able to do this, and we're excited about this opportunity. And I hope that you are excited as well, and that you've come with anticipating interesting teaching at the very least. And that we first of all, I would like to ask you to please subscribe, and you'll get notices whenever we do go live. And whenever you make your comments, you can leave questions or what have you, because we're going to be teaching about some interesting things today. And we believe that there's a lot of communities of believers who are not teaching the truth or the full accuracy, but skimming and making some compromises. So we want to go to the full source, which is the word. Regardless of what your denomination or what your specific group is saying, what does the word say? The Devar Elohim is the final arbiter in all these matters. So that's what we're endeavoring to do here, to lift up the name, the teaching, the that which is of the Most High. And he wishes to impart this to us. He wishes for us to know him better. And he's given us the way that we may do that, and to behave as he behaves, to think as he thinks, and so on and so forth. We are to walk as he walks. Halakha, to walk as he walks. And again, many of you will be familiar with the terminology that I'll be using, and some I'll give a little brief thing again. For Messiah's name, we call him Yeshua. Others call him Yahusha, which is also good. The name of Elohim, which is God, G-D, is Elohim. Elohim is the word for El or Elohim. Some people pronounce it, but it's the same word, same letters are to spell that. We talk of Torah rather than law. Law implies something that's fun to avoid or ignore, as opposed to something that we need to keep, we need to observe, we need to understand better. And we're going to be doing that. We have two special messages today, and we're going to have some readings in addition to that. So we pray that you're not anxious, but you want us to come across with the goods. You want us to be faithful to the word if we're going to be presenting it. So we need to do that, and we need to be up on top of things. So again, with regards to your comments, please subscribe and comment. Send your comments to us. And after a while, I'm going to give you our post office box also. But we call the name of the show, besides Kahal Elohim, which is the one term that's used in the Brit Chadashah, in the writings of the New Covenant, Ecclesia Totheo, which is the same as the Hebrew Kahal HaElohim, which is a community or a congregation set apart ones for Elohim. And so that's where we get Kahal Elohim from. That's how you found us, Kahal Elohim, which are the rough equivalent of the English. But that's what Kahal Elohim is all about, a community of believers, often translated as church, which we'll give a teaching on that one day also, as far as how that term came to be used. And it's a term that we don't use because of its origins. But Kahal, or Ecclesia, or Ecclesia, is the called out ones, those who are coming out, gathered from the midst of the communities. Okay, so we're to be a set apart people, a holy people. That is kadosh. It is to be a holy people, which are set apart, and to be distinct. I remember when I was a kid, I used to love Cracker Jacks because I used to eat the Cracker Jacks, right? And I would set apart the peanuts because I like the peanuts better than the Cracker Jacks. So I would enjoy the caramel corn, but at the end of it, I would look forward to those peanuts. So I set them aside because they were the special part of my snack. Okay, so might be a bad example. Take it for what it's worth. But we set apart the things that we treasure, that we want to really enjoy without feeling rushed. And we won't be feeling rushed today because we're going to be taking as long as it needs to take, and that's good. But Shabbat is something that we will be discussing quite frequently because the purpose of Shabbat has been ignored or has been transmutated into something that it was never intended to be. It's not to be a snooze fest. It's an opportunity to be quickened, to be alert, to be prepared to give an account of yourself, to be prepared to receive from the Ruach the things that you need to know. So we will be doing week by week, we'll be doing intensive studies, and we will be leading this by going through the scriptures, through the Greek, through the Hebrew, and doing a very careful textual criticism of various things. Another word besides Torah is Tanakh. Instead of Old Testament, I use the term Tanakh, which is Torah, the law, Ne'im, which is the prophets, and Chatuvim, which are the writings. So together, the Hebrew Bible was referred to as Tanakh. We don't say Old Testament, which implies that everything within it is old and dated and can only be used for, wrapping up fish to throw it into the garbage. Okay, newspaper that's outdated, and basically it lines, the bird cage of a nice parakeet. I mean, it serves its purpose, but it's not Torah. Torah is never old. In fact, the Brit Chadashah, the new covenant, only gets newer as time goes forward. So we want to thank you for once again being with us this day, and that we could do something that would be a help to you and be a blessing to you. And again, last week we began our journey together, and we need to be encouraged and gain strength from the Most High, because Yahuwah, the eternal Yah, is the source, is the font of the waters of eternity, the waters of light that'll keep us going forward. And don't feel intimidated by the word. We are to learn the word. He wants us to know what's on his mind. He wants us to know what he has planned for us. He wants us to know how we can live more successfully, more healthfully, more happily. And today I'm going to be looking into my segment, which is going to be the joy of keeping Torah, the joy of keeping that. By keeping his words and his commandments, we can actually gain simcha, joy and happiness, and live a better life. And Michael's going to be sharing more on the purpose of Shabbat keeping and guarding, because that's what the word means. Shamar is to keep, to guard, to protect, and so on. We're going to be going forward with that. And let me go right ahead and get the ball rolling here. We are going to begin by our readings, and we're going to start with by holding up the Torah. We're in my living room, so there's not a whole lot of room to do Torah processions around the bima and so on. So we want to still have Torah where we can lift it up and rejoice in it and be grateful for this word. Amen. So Michael's going to lift that up. Just hold it by the bottom two handles. Okay. When the ark would travel, Moshe would say, "Arise, O Lord, and let your enemies be scattered. Let them that hate you flee from you. For from Zion shall go forth the Torah, and the word of Yahuwah from Jerusalem. Blessed be he who in his holiness gave Torah to his people Israel. Blessed be he who in his holiness gave Torah to his people Israel." And even that subject, Israel, who's Israel? We're going to be going into that and going further, okay? So we say, bless the eternal who is to be blessed. Bless the eternal Yah, the blessed one for all eternity. Blessed are you, eternal Yah, our Elohim, Melech HaOlam, sovereign of the universe, who has chosen us from all peoples and has given us his Torah. Blessed are you, O eternal Yahuwah, who is the giver of the Torah. So those people who would claim that this is a form of idolatry somehow, you're holding up a thing. It is Torah, it is the word. It is the word, and we worship and celebrate the giver of Torah. So Baruch Hashem. So Ki Mitzion Detzei Torah Udvar Yahuwah MeYerushalayim. Blessed are you, the eternal Yah, our Elohim, King of the universe, who's given us the Torah of truth and has planted eternal life in our midst. Blessed are you, O Yahuwah, Yah, giver of Torah. Ki Mitzion Detzei Torah. Amen. And the word from Jerusalem. Amen. 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 It is good. It is good to celebrate the fact that we know where Torah comes from. We know where the instruction comes from. It comes from Hashemayim, the heavens, and it goes to Sinai, to Moshe, to the people, to the community, the Kahal HaElohim. So we know where it comes from. You know, a lot of people like mysteries. Well, this is one mystery that's been solved. We know where it comes from. We know it is breathed by Elohim. It is Elohim breathed. It is inspired. The word inspires us as we read it, we breathe deeply, because we are of the category of people who are alive, and we are nephesh. We are living souls. So as we are living souls, we have been committed to live in light of the revelation of Elohim. So let us get started. We have our readers. Who is our first reader today? That will be Miss Patricia Miller. Okay. And Miguel, you can set that down over there if you can. Ooh,
Shabbat Shalom.
Shabbat Shalom.
Today's scripture is from Psalm 65.
And we read these portions of scripture, unless noted otherwise, we read them responsively and responsibly. So you're welcome to read along with us. This is Psalm 65. We tend to have a separate special Bible, which is a Gideon Bible series, so we can actually read the same words together, so it's less conflict or confusion there. Okay, Psalm 65. Yes, ma'am.
And we will read it responsibly.
All right.
Praise is awaiting you, O Elohim, in Zion, and to you the vow shall be performed.
O you who hear prayer, to you all flesh will come.
Iniquities prevail against me. As for our transgressions, you will provide atonement for them.
Blessed is the man you choose and cause to approach you, that he may dwell in your courts. We shall be satisfied with the goodness of your house, of your holy temple.
By awesome deeds and righteousness, you will answer us, O Elohim of our salvation. You who are the confidence of all the ends of the earth and of the far-off seas.
Who established the mountains by his strength, being clothed with power.
You who still the noise of the seas, the noise of the waves, and the tumult of the peoples.
They also who dwell in the farthest parts of the earth, your signs. You make the outgoings of the morning and evening rejoice.
You visit the earth and water it. You greatly enrich it. The river of Elohim is full of water. You provide their grain, for so you have prepared it.
You water its riches abundantly. You settle its furrows. You make it soft with showers. You bless its growth.
You crown the year with your goodness, and your paths drip with abundance.
They drop on the pastures of the wilderness, and the little hills rejoice on every side.
Together,
the pastures are clothed with flocks. The valleys also are covered with grain. They shout for joy. They also sing. A lot of joy, a lot of simcha.
The psalm has a simple purpose. That is to express thanksgiving for rain and harvest. It is addressed to Elohim in its entirely and presents him as the Elohim who forgives, verses 1 to 4. The Elohim who intervenes in history, verses 5 to 8. And the Elohim who provides, verses 9 to 13. Thank you.
Amen. Amen. Thank you, Ms. Patricia.
You're welcome.
Okay. Miguel?
Yes, I'll come over here.
Okay, Michael.
Okay, yes. Shabbat Shalom again, everyone. I'll be reading some verses from the book of Deuteronomy, chapter 4. But first, I'd like to say something in advance, is that we know the 10 commandments, the 10 words, are listed in Deuteronomy chapter 5 and Exodus chapter 20. So in Deuteronomy chapter 5, we have a listing of the 10 commandments. And the second commandment, of course, is in regards to idolatry. Matter of fact, in Deuteronomy chapter 5, take a look here in starting in verse 8. You shall not make for yourselves the carved image, any likeness of anything that is in heaven above, or that is in the earth beneath, or that is in the water under the earth. You shall not bow down to them nor serve them. And again, then it continues there in regards to the eternal speaking, the Lord speaking there. Now, something to realize is that the prior chapter of Deuteronomy chapter 5 is chapter 4, of course. And Deuteronomy chapter 4 puts special emphasis on the second commandment all by itself. Really, there's really no other commandment that's really specified and given more attention than the second commandment in Deuteronomy chapter 4. So if you turn to Deuteronomy chapter 4, we'll read some verses there that show this context. Again, Deuteronomy chapter 4. The first verse we will read is starting in verses 1 and 2. Hear, all Israel, to the statutes and judgments that I will give you and teach you, that you may possess the land. Now, verse 2. You shall not add to the word which I command you, nor take away from it. Why? That you may keep the commandments of the eternal, your Elohim, the Lord your God, which I command you. So we see here that adding anything to God's words or taking away from it actually perverts, right, their actually fulfillment in our lives, to how we work out. But now, we continue down in verse 9, starting in verse 9, Deuteronomy chapter 4. Right, starting in verse 9. Only take heed to yourselves and diligently keep yourself, lest you forget the things which your eyes have seen, and lest they depart from your heart all the days of your life, and teach them to your children and to your grandchildren. Okay, verse 10. Especially concerning the day that you stood before the eternal your Elohim in Horeb, and the Lord eternal said, gather me, all the people, that they may what? Hear my words, that they may learn to fear me all the days and teach their children, of course. Verse 11. You came near and stood at the foot of the mountain, and the mountain burned with fire, and the midst of heaven with darkness, clouds, and thick darkness. Mind you, in verse 11, we have darkness, cloud, and thick darkness. There's something there that God the Eternal did not want them to see. Actually, it was him, his form, that he would have when later on the elders approached. But right now we're seeing here that there's thick darkness, something that not to be seen. Verse 12. And the Eternal spoke to you out of the midst of the fire. You heard the sound of the words, but you saw no form. You only heard a voice. Mind you, verse 12, only heard a voice. Verse 15, jump to verse 15. Take careful heed to yourselves that you saw no form of the Eternal, the Lord, which you spoke to you at Horeb out of the midst of the fire. Right, continuing. Verse 16, lest you act corruptly and make for yourselves. Here we go, the second commandment. Make for yourselves a carved image in the form of any figure, the likeness of male or females. Verse 17, likeness of any animal which is on the earth, or the likeness of any winged bird that flies in the air. Verse 18, the likeness of anything that creeps on the ground, or the likeness of any fish that is in the water beneath the sea. Verse 19, and take heed lest you lift up your eyes to heaven, and when you see the sun, the moon, and the stars, and all the hosts of heaven, you feel driven to worship them and serve them, okay, which the Eternal, your Elohim, has given you, all the peoples, for a heritage. So now we see here, in the context here, again, only in the context of the second great commandment, he's giving a warning about making any images. Why is that? Images, of course, in dealing with psychology, people are more inclined to follow something they see rather than something that they hear. Okay? And therefore, there's a danger in forgetting what you hear, right, and focusing on what you see. So we saw these verses here that the Eternal says that I want you to be concentrating on my words. Matter of fact, he doesn't even give them a visual representation of himself, as we saw prior, but covered by the thick darkness and the clouds, right? But they only heard words. So therefore, if someone is given the opportunity, psychology of idolatry, is that if there's something that you hear, something that you see, you're inclined to follow what you see rather than what you hear. So what he does is that he takes away that option on the Mount Horeb. He takes away the option of something to be seen, only something to be heard. So therefore, if you have two lifelines, he's taking one away. There's only one lifeline to grab onto. So he's utilizing this procedure here in chapter 5 to give himself no visual representation, but only his words. Verse 23 of Deuteronomy chapter 4. Take heed to yourselves, lest you forget the covenant of the eternal your Elohim, which he made with you. Here we go. And make for yourselves a carved image in the form of anything which the eternal your Elohim has forbidden you. Again, you will forget the covenant if you make the image, because you're inclined to follow more what you see rather than what you hear. Verse 25. When you beget children and grandchildren and have grown old in the land and act corruptly, and make a carved image in the form of anything, and followed by what? And do evil in the sight of the eternal your Elohim, to provoke him to anger. Why? Because it takes the focus off his words, off his commandments, and off this idol, this thing. That an idol and thing, of course, does not have any power of itself in regards to speaking about commandments, in regards to behavioral issues, idolatry, murder, stealing, lying. Verse 28. And there you will serve what? Elohim made of man's hands, wood and stone, which neither see nor hear nor eat nor smell, right? And also provide nothing in regards to behavioral ethics. Last verse is verse 36 of Deuteronomy chapter 4. In the context, out of heaven, he let you hear his voice, that he might instruct you on the earth. And he showed you his the great fire, and you heard his words out of the midst of the fire. Again, we see here in chapter 4 of Deuteronomy, it's specifying, and the specificity is in regards to the second commandment regarding idolatry. And why is that? Because something that you see takes precedence over something that you hear. You're inclined also to forget, as we saw in Deuteronomy chapter 4, the words that he spoke by something that you see. So, brethren, keep in your memory banks, Deuteronomy chapter 4 is an explanation, it's an exegesis of the second commandment we see in Deuteronomy chapter 5. Thank you.
Amen. Amen. And again, that emphasizes the consistency of the word, where the word is echad. We listen to the word. We, regardless of whether we belong to a denomination or a group that was established, that they've been doing it this way, they've been talking this way, and everyone is kind of bought and sold on it. If it's not true, it's not true. Truth has no concern for feelings, in the sense that, I don't mean to hurt your feelings, but this is the way it is. And today we've been so obsessing over making everyone feel comfortable, making 0.5% comfortable at the expense of the other 99.5%, whatever. Do you do the math? I'm too busy thinking here. I can't think and speak at the same time. Okay, so we thank the eternal Yahuwah for being with us, for giving us his word, his promises, the benefits of walking with him. And we are Yelodim. We are his children. We are not only begotten, but we have been born from above, in the sense that we have what we need now. We have the milk of the word to grow up to full measure of solid foods. And in Abraham's day, remember when Yitzhak was being weaned, it was a big celebration. So the transition from mother's milk to solid food is cause for celebration. Remember, we celebrate the milk of the word, which is another whole sidetrack we can go down with regards to the milk of the word coming from the sod, which is the breast, which is the root of the word for Shaddai, Shaddai, and that is the almightiness of Elohim, because he's capable of feeding us and nurturing us. But interesting enough, we make the transition from the milk to the food. Besar means flesh. It also means the gospel. So once we mature, we're able to understand the gospel. You know, if we're still drinking the milk, you know, all our needs are being taken care of for us. You know, the baby just has to, my little grandson, Liam, I hope you're watching right now. Liam, when he's hungry, he just lays on his back and cries, screams, belly aches, feed me, you know? But once you mature, that perspective changes. Now you have to prepare your food. You have to cook it. You have to prepare it. You have to get the cutlery, knife, grow and mature in it. It becomes wonderful. Okay, our connection's unstable. Okay, I hope that you're hearing this. Okay, 57, okay. Just got a little update saying something unstable about the connection. So I hope you're hearing all of this. not because it's my wonderful words that you're hearing, but we're coming across with some interesting things. And the world standards is always going to be the world standards until Mashiach comes and establishes his standards, even as Daniel prophesied with him setting up his government, him being the leader over his government and his people obeying the laws and of this covenant, and therefore having the promises fulfilled for them. But the way that the world deals with winners is strange. You'll notice we had this scandal about these families that were trying to get their kids into college through cheating. You know, we hear of the winning teams. When the Astros won the World Series a couple years ago, they were cheating. You know, the Patriots, when they won one of the Super Bowls, they were cheating. Deflategate, whatever. So the world's definition of winners is win at all costs, and dishonesty follows this way of thinking, where win at all costs, whatever it takes. Whoever I need to step on along the way, you know, sorry about that, but that's just the way it is. Anyway, so as I said earlier, that 12 times in the New Covenant, the term for community of Elohim is there. So Kahal Elohim should be a term that we get familiar with. Kahal Elohim, Ecclesia, Tuthea, which is the Greek equivalent of that Hebrew. So that we are set apart. We are set apart. We are a distinct community of believers, of those who are striving to be of one mind, to love each other. As Michael was saying, we cannot love Elohim if we don't love each other. You know, the scriptures tell us that. How can we love Elohim who we have not seen when we don't even love our brother and our sister whom we do see? And perhaps we see them too often. Perhaps we're letting our flesh get in the way. Not perhaps, it's definitely the problem. We get in the way, and we have troubles. Source is the result of that. Okay. Now, as I said earlier, I'd like to talk to you. The subject I'd like to deal with is the joy of the word. Torah will give you happiness. Will give you happiness, absolutely happiness. And I'm just getting myself organized here. And I looked, just out of curiosity, I saw that there is there's 4 different types of happiness from a neurochemical spurt, if you will. There's 4 ways that the carnal man or woman receives happiness or pleasure. The endorphin happiness is triggered by physical pain. The body's natural morphine makes pain disappear with a euphoric state. And these are only saved only for the moments that will help when it's necessary to survive. So it's a survival mechanism. It's not like, oh, I want to feel euphoric. That way I save money on my drugs. I can just create the endorphin levels that I need and make morphine in my own mind, in my own brain. Okay. The second is the dopamine happiness, is triggered by when you get a new reward. It is reserved for those moments when an important goal is within reach. So we get happy. We see what we've worked so hard for is coming. Oh, I'm so happy about that. It's finally the finish line. Okay. Oxytocin happiness is triggered when we trust those around us. It promotes bonding when you're with a group of like-minded people, or when you get a massage. So that's interesting, isn't it? When you're in the kahal or the ecclesia, you're with people that love you, and you get this type of happiness. But also, when you get a massage, it's like massaging. It's like a deep massage. It makes you feel good. You feel good from head to tail, right? Okay, I'm going to start my own rights here. Then there's the serotonin happiness, which is triggered when we feel important. Being one up feels good, but conflict can cause painful injuries. The risk of pain versus the satisfaction of winning. That's the choice you got to make. So again, is happiness purely chemical? Is it purely chemical? And one of the things I wanted to talk about, I just heard this the other day. The details, I'm a little dodgy. I don't remember all, but the moral of the story is clear, and I know where it goes. There was this man in, I believe it was in Vietnam, who was in the paddy field, the rice paddy field, and he had sustained an injury. And it was a bad injury, and so as he was recovering, he was so miserable, the pain, because he had to, wade through the waters, and it just wasn't healing. And he was miserable. He was depressed. He would be crying, and he would be crying, and he would be crying. And they were trying to figure out what medication we can give this guy so that he would be happy. And that's the problem today. George doesn't look like I don't see a smile on his face. Why isn't he happy? So maybe we should give him something to make him happy. Okay. So what happened is this caring physician came into the picture and asked him what's wrong. We don't address the issue. We want to mask it and start pumping drugs through your veins, whatever. So what's wrong? And he says, well, I'm having a hard time healing. I'm doing this, and it's making it worse. And I feel like I'm failing my family. I feel like I'm just being miserable. And he's saying this through tears. And so the doctors said, well, have you thought of other ways of doing this? And so again, I'm not great at telling these stories when I don't have it in front of me and I can refer to, but this depression was overwhelming him and he was weeping a lot. And so with a little change, the physician saying, well, what would make you feel better? And he thought about it. Says, how about a cow? A cow. Okay. So they provided a cow for him. He started milking the cow. He started working in the dairy business. He made a transition. The thing that was making him miserable was no longer part of the picture. So to make him happy, he wasn't taking drugs and medications. He was taking a cow. Okay. A simple solution. Change the vocation, change the scenario, and no longer, and of course he's perfectly healed, but he stayed in this new vocation and he's happy. It's wonderful to be happy. It's wonderful to have a sense of accomplishment, a sense of purpose. And so does keeping Torah make you happy? Does it give you joy? Does it give you simcha? It sounds like when you're talking to somebody who's not part of the covenant, they'll say, well, it sounds like a lot of rules, a lot of things like that. How can that possibly make you happy? Unless it's tied with the, with the carrot. You get the carrot and the stick. Both are good motivators. Which one is the one that Elohim is offering us? Okay. So how do we develop a kingdom mindset is really what it comes down to. And that's what Torah does. It gives us a kingdom mindset. We start functioning, we start behaving, we start thinking the way that the Eternal thinks. People get excited for the wrong reasons. There's a celebrity who just recently accepted the Lord, okay? And he's all excited and he's telling people about it. And he hooked up with Mr. Osteen. And they're having these huge, immense church services. And, there's people being interviewed. I never would have come into a regular church, but now that obviously I'm talking about Kanye West, okay? Now that Kanye's here and he's preaching and he's doing this, I have to be there because that's where he is and that's where the celebrities are. That's where it's all out of whack. And the thing is that if somebody comes to the Lord, now remember that's a good thing. It's a good thing, right? Luke 15:7 reminds us that the Malachim, those who in the heavens above, rejoice over every sinner that repents, that turns over. But there's rejoicing. There's rejoicing in this. I want to rejoice with people who are content. And I'm not saying that people who are happy about Kanye are wrong and they're not getting it, but they are. They're looking at an individual, and now this individual has got to identify himself as a babe. And don't ask me. I'm still learning. I can only teach you what I know so far, and I am a babe. And the humility is the road to a fuller education. And when he still refers to himself as the greatest artist who ever lived, that's somewhat problematic. So anyway, so there's rejoicing in the heavens for everyone who truly repents. We have to repent and not look to celebrities to endorse the Bible. We have to learn as he needs to learn at the proper rate, at the proper place. And the people that he's decided to fasten his wagon to, and I'm sure he's going to want equal billing, is not necessarily a good place. It could be good as it's used as a contrast to the truth, but as a source of absolute truth, he's in a little bit over his head and he's a little trouble. So anyway, let's go into the meat of the word. I want to look first at Psalm 19. How do we become kingdom mindset? Because this whole old saying is accepting Jesus as your personal savior is nowhere in the scriptures. It's a pagan idea. You have this little icon essentially that you can whip out whenever you're feeling low or underappreciated, and your personal savior cheers you up. And as you say this little repeat after me little prayer, Repeat after me. I, insert your name. I, insert your name. No, put your name in there. Okay. Bob. I'm very sorry about my life. I'm sorry about my life, whatever. And I accept you as my savior, my personal savior. And now I am born again. And you've been born again. You said the sinner's prayer. You've received your inoculation. You've received your flu shot. And so now you're locked into this health mode that nothing can bother you. Nothing is wrong. Your behavior has not changed one iota. And that's what Torah does. It changes you. It changes. It converts the soul. It changes your outlook, because now we're hearing the perspective and the point of view of Yahuwah Elohim. That's what we're hearing it from. That's what we need to hear it from. And regardless of these wealthy ministries, it's just very dangerous, very, very dangerous. So Psalm 19, we don't accept a personal savior. We accept his lordship, his kingship on a personal level. Once we understand what the kingdom is about, we understand who the king is. We understand what his requirements are. And they're not just to sit around and just bask in the fact that you are saved and nothing is required of you. Okay, so Psalm 19, verse 7 through 11. This is a beautiful portion of the scriptures. It is Torah. Torah is teaching. So even though it's a psalm, it is just as much Torah as anywhere else in Tanakh and throughout the scriptures. It says the Torah of Yahuwah, the eternal Yah, is perfect, reviving the soul. So it's complete. It is perfect. The Father of lights, there's no shadow of variation. All that is good comes down from that place of origin, which is perfect, spotless. The Torah came from that very place. It's perfect. It revives the soul. It revives us. We're dead men and dead women walking. We need to be revived. We need to be revised. We need to be upgraded. We're operating on an antiquated system. So the Torah is perfect. It revives the soul. The statutes of the eternal Yah are trustworthy, making wise the simple. See, this is the acknowledgement to saying, I don't know much about this Elohim stuff. Can you teach me? Can I learn by you? And I promise not to interrupt you so much unless I have a real question, and not question whether what you're saying is correct or not. Because everything needs to be tested, actually, everything. Prove all things, test all things, accept the good, reject the bad. Things that don't measure up to Scripture, and Scripture interprets Scripture better than any college degree or any seminar or seminary cemetery. Okay, so making it, the statutes, his statutes are trustworthy. You can trust on them. You can bank on it. They're trustworthy. We want to make sure that before we get anywhere down the line, that something has weight to it and substance to it, not just some little nothing. Okay, so it is trustworthy, making wise the simple. The precepts of Yahuwah are right. They're correct. The word is yashar, which means to be straight. To be straight. It's like when we want somebody to talk with us, we say, "Be straight with me. Let me know exactly what's on your mind." Okay, be straight with me, and that's what it is. His precepts are direct. They're purposeful. They're honest. They don't mess up, because they are correct and they are right. Okay, and the precepts which are correct give joy to the heart. Okay, Mesa Meche Levi. Okay, Lev. Okay. They give joy to the heart. They give joy to the heart. And the word for joy is simcha, which comes from the word samach, which means to brighten up, to cheer up. Simcha is joy. The commandments, the mitzvot of the eternal Yah, are radiant, giving light to the eyes. So this is all about the commandments. It's all about his statutes, his precepts, all the things that emanate from Yahuwah, because they don't have their origin in man. Mankind cannot create these things. That's why grace, to fully understand what grace is all about, it is a gift of Elohim, because it doesn't come from our efforts. It does not come from us. We don't spew out grace. We receive grace, which gives us the power to overcome, gives us power and discipline to fulfill our purposes on this planet. Okay. Okay. Next is the fear. The fear of the eternal Yah is pure, and the word for pure is clean, which is tahor. You have tahor or you have tamai, clean or unclean. And of course, we know what's pure based upon what the Torah declares is for. And to fear Yahuwah is to revere him, but also to be fearful of him, because we can't play around. You know, the kid who breaks something in the house and has to wait for mom or dad to come home and fess up, there's some fear involved in that. So we got to make sure that we understand and apply what this psalm is declaring. The fear is pure and it endures forever. It endures forever. The ordinances of the eternal Yah are sure and altogether righteous. Altogether righteous. The fullest expression of righteousness are the ordinances of Yahuwah. And they are sure. They're sure. Even as Messiah said, let your yes be yes, let your no be no. You need to be sure. Before you enter into this realm, so to speak, you have to make sure that it is right. Not just for you, but you have to count the cost. You have to make sure this is what you signed up for, because it's going to change your life. And it's going to change it for the better. But if we fight against it, if we struggle against it, we're going to have a hard time. We're going to be miserable with a smile plastered on our face. Oh, no, I'm very happy. I'm very happy. I'm converted. I'm born again. I got a personal savior I keep in my right breast pocket. Okay. Okay, I'm just being told by McAfee that I have no viruses on my PC. That's good news. And this is they're more precious or more desirable than gold, than much pure gold. Okay, and that's the standard, the gold standard of excellence, of wealth, right? Gold. Want to sell my records, I want to make sure that they're going to go gold. They're not going to sit on a shelf on the sale bin. So we have to strive for that which does not decay and depreciate. You know, you have that wonderful car you just drove off the lot. As soon as you hit the pavement, it's depreciating. It is losing value, And they are also sweeter than honey in the comb. So that's pretty sweet. That's pretty rare and expensive, right? That's what this is. Okay. By them is your servant warned. That's an interesting way to say that. By them, Zahar is the word for warning, and the root of it is to gleam, to enlighten, as if by caution, to admonish, to teach, to shine, to illuminate a path so we don't stumble. That's what Torah does, right? It illuminates our path. So it is a warning. It cautions us because there is a price to pay. You know, you read the 30th chapter of Deuteronomy. It'll tell you, this day choose life, but life and death hang in the balance. When sin gives birth, it gives birth to death. When obedience gives birth, it gives birth to life. So we have to weigh all these things, look to the scriptures, get a good teacher, and learn. And even the Kanye's of this world, and maybe he is. And I don't mean to speak rashly or be judgmental, but we are told to judge with righteous judgment. And if people are clamoring to hear so-and-so speak or to see so-and-so rap or sing or whatever because of his celebrity, that's the wrong thing. There's one celebrity whose standard that we seek to please and to match and to meet, and that's Mashiach. He came in the flesh to show us that we can do this. We can do this. He didn't come thumbing his nose at the rest of us saying, aha, you can't do this. I'm the son Ben Elohim, so I can do this. But you just got to continue to fail and fall and mess up. Well, that's not what the scriptures is going to show in this teaching today. In keeping them, there is great reward. There's great reward. And again, keeping them is the word shamar, which is shomer. The root is to hedge about, to observe, to guard, to protect, to attend to heed. Remember, Messiah says, if you want to enter into life, you need to keep the commandments. So life and death lie in the balance of sin, which is to miss the mark, or obedience, which is to be a faithful servant, a faithful child of the Most High. Okay? So we need to keep them. That's the word. He that keepeth Israel, neither slumbers nor sleeps. Remember to keep the Sabbath day holy. We need to look for this word as a clue, not just to keep in the sense of understand them, but to guard them, to protect them, to lock them in the safe if you have to protect them from contamination. Okay, and there's great reward. The word is ekev, which is the same word for compensation. You will be rewarded. Remember the Talmudim came to Yeshua, the disciples, and they said, we left everything. We left everything to follow you. So what's up with that? Are we going to go hungry and abandoned? He says, listen up. Nobody has left anything that you're not going to be fully compensated for in this life. And we need to understand that as Romans chapter 10, verse 4, Messiah is the goal at which the Torah aims. When we miss the mark, that's chet, chatan. It is to miss the mark. That's a transgression. That's to miss the mark. That's not to murder your wife. That's not the sin that is forgiven. There's a sin that leads to life. There's a sin that leads to death. We can be repentant of certain things. Other things, we better be very careful. There is great reward. Psalm 119. I'm going to continue with this. Psalm 119, verse 14. It says, I rejoice in following your statutes as one rejoices in great riches. And in Psalm 119, verses 72 and 162, all talk about the riches, the richness of the word, that its value is inestimable. We can't put a price tag on it. It's beyond that. In Psalm 119, I'm looking at verse 111. It says, your statutes are my heritage forever, which is our inheritance. Nachal, nachalti. They are my inheritance. They are my, what I am set to inherit. They are my heritage forever. So the statutes are ours forever. They are the joy of my heart, says Song Levi. They are joy and gladness. Joy and gladness. They are the joy of my heart. Ultimately, the Torah, the instruction, the voice, the words of the Most High are the most important thing in your life. So we have to make sure that we understand them. We have to make sure that we walk in them and continue to walk in them, to get off to the good start and to maintain it and not to fall by the wayside. Because if we're being fed regularly, if we're getting the meat of the Messiah, of the gospel, of the truth, of his standards, we won't be starving. We won't be weak and passing out from malnutrition. We need to make sure that we're getting fed on the word. And that's what we attempt to do on the Sabbath. The Sabbath day is not just a day for lounging and relaxing. You want to take a siesta or a nap, that's fine. But you got to eat first. You got to work first. You only get rest once you do the work. Shaul says, you don't work, you don't eat. Plain and simple. Okay, Proverbs 13, verse 9. Proverbs 13, verse 9. The light of the righteous rejoices, but the lamp of the wicked shall be put out. So again, how do we know who are righteous? We just read that. We just read what is the standard of righteousness. Righteousness, a right standing. Righteous by his judgments, by his perspective, which we need to share. We don't have two unique perspectives. If we walk with him, walk before him and be perfect, we need to understand that our perspective does not vary or veer from the course, okay? The light of the righteous rejoices. We're content, we're happy. But the lamp of the wicked shall be put out. Proverbs 29, verse 6. In the transgression of an evil man, there is a snare, but the righteous can sing and rejoice. And of course, that's not talking about being careless while somebody's worrying you kind of carefree. We need to walk through life with the fear of Yahuwah as our guide. Proverbs 29:18, and this is very important. Where there is no vision, the people perish, or the people cast off restraint. But he that keeps Torah, he that keeps the Torah, the law, happy is he. Well, you can say that. That's okay. That's fine. Thank you. Okay, let's get that again. Where there is no vision or revelation or understanding of the word, the people perish, or the people cast off restraint, because it's the same thing. Para means to loosen, to expose, to dismiss. Not for me. Sorry. Sounded interesting at first, but you kind of lost me there. Where there is no vision, the people perish because they cast off restraint. And what they consider restraint is actually the lifeline to Elohim. We cast it off as something that is beggarly, is something that's religion, and I don't want religion. I want to have as much freedom. And they use that term freedom in the wrong way, because their prison is the most devious of them all, because it has the allure of freedom. Okay? But he that keeps the Torah, happy is he. Okay? We're not casting off restraint. We're not perishing, because we're keeping Torah, and we have joy. We have happiness. And asher is happiness. It's also blessedness. Blessed are they. And also in the Greek in the New Covenant, through the Beatitudes, blessed are they. It's also happy are they. So when we're blessed, we're happy. When we're happy, we're blessed. If it's within the context of Messiah and his revelation, if it's within the context of the life that he would have us live in fullness of joy. Fullness of joy. That's a pretty good deal. But the ones keeping Torah, happy are they. Ashrehu are they who keep Torah. They are happy. And remember, to keep also means to guard, to protect. So there's something about keeping Torah that it is precious. I'm keeping it, but I'm guarding it. I'm not letting you contaminate it. I'm not letting you come along with your little messages which tell me that grace is something that's just dropped in our laps whether we like it or not. I'm not going to sit still for that. We need to abide in him as he abides, is willing to abide. He's willing to abide with us. And a lot of us are not the most lovable people in the world. So he loves the unlovable, and he wants us to love the unlovable also as we follow his example. Psalm 1. Ashrei, happy, blessed is the man who does not walk in the counsel of the wicked. Okay, the wicked are the lawless. Whenever we see the word wicked, we're generally talking about lawlessness. And again, those who cast off the restraint, who don't believe that the laws of the land need to be observed or kept or guarded or respected. Okay, does not walk in the counsel of the wicked, or stand in the way, the derech of the sinners, or sit in the seat of mockers. So I've always looked at this, and I'm my friends here, I've heard this so many times before, but we see a progression. We see the one who walks in the path, then stands because something's got his attention. He's just been told that the standard of being a believer is really dropped. You know, it's really non-existent. There is no standard. You can pretty much make it up as you go along. Oh, I like that. I had my flu shot. I had my Jesus flu shot. So now I'm saved. I'm born again. You know, and then sitting in the seat of mockers. I can sit. I walk past. Something gets my attention. I stand still. And then, wow, this comforting word that I have to do nothing. I have to lift up a little pinky finger. And I'm saved, and I'm headed towards my mansion in the skies. This is dangerous because they are mockers. Those who are sitting, waiting for you to come along and receive their demonic words are mockers. They're mocking the truth. They have long ago cast off the restraint. Long ago, they don't even know what it looks like. But you know what? Messiah offers us his yoke. His yoke is easy and his burden is light. And the word for easy in the Greek is Christos, which is the same word for Messiah. It is to be positive and to be righteous and helpful. So when we say, let me just back up a second. I just went ahead of myself. The mockers casting off restraint to the yoke. Messiah offers us a yoke. Bear my yoke. And this is another whole teaching, so I won't go too deep in it. But Messiah offers us to be yoked with him. What does that mean? We don't know what that means. It's historically and culturally, when you're training a young ox, you team him with an experienced ox so that he learns the ropes, he learns the way to operate and function. And you take the strongest ox and you team him with the novice, the rookie with the veteran, and he learns the way. And pretty soon the rookie is behaving just like the veteran, doing everything that's what that means. My yoke is easy. Come on, boys. Come on, girls. Let's be yoked together. He's willing to be yoked with us, to be bound with us. So those who cast off restraint reject Messiah's invitation. Okay? But going back to Psalm 1, but his delight and her delight is in the Torah of Yahuwah, and on his law she meditates day and night. It's life. It's life for us. It's not like one of the many clubs I belong to or the many teams I support, whatever sports I like or whatever. The Torah is what I meditate on day and night. If you love the Torah of Elohim, you will have peace in your life. You will have peace in your life. Last week I spoke about shalom, peace. Today is joy. Going back to Psalm 119, verse 165, 119, verse 165, it says, great peace, which is shalom rav, great peace have they who love your Torah. Ahav, the love is there, Torah techa, of the Torah, and nothing can make them stumble. So if we enjoy, just like the old saying is, if you really enjoy what you do for a living, you don't work a day in your life, because it's wow, I get to do this again. This is what I've wanted to do since I was a kid, and I'm doing it. I'm living the life and appreciating it and rejoicing in it. I don't feel pressured. You want to work overtime? Sure. More of a good thing? Sure, why not? Nothing can make you stumble. Nothing can make you stumble. That's quite a boast. If great peace have they who love your Torah, and having that love will cause us to never stumble. And that's something else. That means we're focused. The Torah illuminates our path, so there's nothing that will cause us to stumble. That's pretty impressive. Matthew 24 in the Brit Chadashah. Ayin, nothing can make you stumble. Matthew 24, 22 to 25. If those days had not been cut short, no one would survive. But for the sake of the elect, those days will be cut short. At that time, if anyone says to you, look, here is Mashiach, or there he is, do not believe it. For false messiahs and false prophets will appear and perform great signs and miracles to deceive even the elect, if that were possible. So if we're part of the elect, we're expected to reject the foolishness, even if it's clothed in miracles and clothed in beauty. The adversary himself comes as an angel of light, a malach of or, of light. And then after he says that, if it were possible, he says, Hine, behold, see, I have told you ahead of time, so that we won't be deceived. Because remember, in the Olivet account in 24, they ask Mashiach what will be the sign of his coming. First thing he says, make sure that no one deceives you. And that includes yourself. The self-deception is a sad and tragic thing. I've seen it happen so many times in my life. People deceiving themselves. Very tragic, and tragic results. So again, great peace have those who love you, not just tolerate it or have to do it because you got to do it, but develop a love relationship. You have to love Torah. And as you do it, it starts making sense, a deeper level that's not a physical, intellectual level. It's beyond that. It not only makes sense, it makes life. Okay? His Torah reflects the way that he thinks. Breaking his commandments handicaps us. Obeying gives us peace of mind, joy, and satisfaction. We don't want to have our lives handicapped by walking contrary to the way of life. We want to have life and have it abundantly, right? We want to have as full life as we can. You blink and a life is over. And I'll be talking a few minutes later about a situation that's happened recently. His commandments are expressions of his love and his character. If we live the lifestyle that he offers and puts it into practice, puts his commandments into practice, we will receive blessings. We will be asher. We will be happy because we will be blessed from the source of all blessing. We will receive blessings, rewards, and happiness. The true secret to human happiness is found is fulfilled. We find fulfillment. We have our purpose, and to be designated as his elect, to be designated as those who would walk before him and be perfect. What better destiny is that? What better destiny is that? Okay, Matthew 5 says, "Let your light shine before men, and they may see good deeds and praise your Father in heaven." So that's all part of the reason too, to live and to lead by example. And okay, I won't go into. I'll try to cut this off a little bit here, but I wanted to go to the book of Nehemiah, the book of Nehemiah, chapter 8 of Nehemiah, and this is as we approach the autumn Moedim, the appointed times of the fall, the time of the harvest. We always turn to this chapter because it's the first day of the seventh month, and the first day of the seventh month is what? It's Yom Teruah, not Rosh Hashanah. It is Yom Teruah, which is the day of the awakening blast. It's not even the day of the shofar. It's the day of the Teruah, which is the blast. As Michael was sharing from Deuteronomy 4, the words going forth were Teruah. When we preach the word effectively, that's a Teruah. It's the sound of a shofar. It's the sound of a drum. It's the sound of a voice. It's all these things. It's Teruah. So let me just encapsulate chapter 8. On the first day of the seventh month, Ezra the priest brought the Torah before the assembly, which is the Kahal. All who could hear it with understanding is who the Kahal is. The Kahal is all those who can hear with understanding. So Ezra and his associates help give sense and help them to understand the reading of the Torah more fully. So only those people who are going to be there are those who have the capacity to understand. And where humility enters in, we need to grow further. It wasn't enough for Apollos to go on the course that he was going. He learned from Priscilla and Aquila a better way, the fullness. Okay. More fully. And the people wept in response to the words of Torah. But Ezra steps in and he sees that they're weeping because of their penitent in their response. He steps in and says, "This day is Kadosh to Yud-Heh-Vav-Heh, to the eternal Yah." And, well, why is it? Is it because he's preaching? It's Yom Teruah. It's the first day of the seventh month. So it is already holy unto Yahuwah, okay? But this day, the sign of your repentance, as Ezra's preaching the word, he's the Teruah who speaks and blasts the awakening call to these individuals who were in a position that they could understand. Now they fully understand, and the response is not, "Wow, we're happy, we're happy." No, it's weeping because we're undone. The word is undone, just like Yehoshua, the king. He was a good king as this young man, but when the Torah was discovered, he ripped he tore his clothing and repented before the eternal Yah. Okay. He says, "This day is Kadosh to Yahuwah. Do not sorrow." And again, this day is Kadosh. It's set aside. It's special. It's specific. "Do not sorrow, for the joy of Yahuwah is your strength." That's where this verse is in context. A lot of people say this all the time. "Joy of the Lord is my strength." There's a little song that's sung, "Oh, the joy of the Lord is our strength, my strength." But this is where it's in context. Repentant, seeing the standard, being confronted as in a mirror and seeing something that's undesirable, but yet it's a starting point. There's a place we can start. Okay, the joy of the eternal Yah is your strength. And then it says, they greatly rejoiced. Okay, Simcha gadola, which is great rejoicing. Simcha, to the greatest level of rejoicing. They greatly rejoice. Why? Because they understood the words that were declared to them, that they understood the implication, they understood the promises, they understood, and we rejoice greatly because we understand these words that bring salvation, that bring truth, that bring us life to the highest measure. Psalm 16, verse 11. Psalm 16, verse 11. I'm coming close to the end here, so bear with me just a few minutes more. Psalm 16, verse 11. You will show me the path of life. Derechai. In your presence is fullness of joy. Semachot, which literally means joys, plural. In your presence is fullness of joy, okay? So where is the fullness? Where is his presence? His presence is there through his word. These people were rejoicing because Yahuwah was in their presence. As Ezra is preaching the word, the eternal Yah is there in their presence. Do you understand that? When the word is circulating, the word is accomplishing everything that sets out to do, because the word is unique. The word of Yahuwah is unique, and it accomplishes everything that it sets out to accomplish. So you will show me the path of life. In your presence, through your word, is fullness of joy. At your right hand are pleasures forevermore. Who's the right hand? Who's the right hand of Yah? It is Yeshua. It's the right hand. And again, remember what he said. If you want to enter into life, keep the commandments. Matthew 19:17. Matthew 19:17. Write that down. If you have a hard time remembering things, review this broadcast today. It's wonderful that we can broadcast this live, and you can check it out later. You can break it down. If you miss a verse here or there, let's go right back and you can see it. Make sure that I'm saying things correctly, so you keep me sharp, iron sharpening iron. Okay, so your presence is in your presence is fullness of joy. At your right hand are pleasures forevermore. So the presence of Yahuwah is with us when his word is being spoken, when his word is going forth. It might sound like my voice, but don't kid yourself. That's the words of the eternal Yah that go forth. They're not my words. Very little of what I'm saying today is me. So I can't take credit for anything here. That is, if anyone's going to give me any credit for this. Zephaniah 3. Okay. Zephaniah 3, verse 17. The eternal Yahuwah, your Elohim, is in your midst. The mighty one, Gibor, the mighty one. He will save. And again, we have the name of Messiah in that word, Yoshia. He will rejoice over you with gladness. Simcha. He will rejoice. He will take delight in you. He will take delight in you. He will rejoice over you with gladness. See, when we walk with the eternal Yah, he rejoices over us. He's delighted by that. He's delighted by that idea. He will quiet you with his love. He will quiet you with his love. And I'm sure all the mothers of young children can appreciate that. When the child is acting up, when the child is crying, going through teething, to quiet that child with love. When our emotions are stirred, when we're frustrated by life, when things come up, and we are not immune to things happening in this world, he will quiet us with his love. And he will rejoice over you with singing. He will sing just as a mother sings a lullaby to her baby, letting the child know that all is well, all is well. And that's what he does. He rejoices over us. He quiets us with his love, and he rejoices over us with singing. In 1 Thessalonians chapter 1, verse 6, the Apostle Paul, Rav Shaul, he says, you received the word in much affliction, with joy of the Ruach HaKodesh, the joy of the Holy Spirit. You received the word in much affliction. You were struggling. You needed to have the word of Yahuwah calm you and soothe you with songs of deliverance. And with joy, in the Ruach. The Ruach seeks for us to be joyful, seeks for us to be celebratory, to rejoice over him. Okay, we're kind of winding down here. Just bear with me 1 second. Yes. 1 John, the first chapter, verse 4. I know Michael knows nothing about 1 John chapter 1. I know it existed. 1 John 1, verse 4 says, "These things we write to you, that your joy may be full, lacking no good thing." The joy is full. There's no room. It's overflowing. These things we write to you. And what is that? That's the inspired word. That's the word. That's the voice of Yahuwah coming through Yochanan, coming through Shaul and Kepha and all the faithful ones. We write to you that your joy, because it is his voice that you're hearing in my writing. And remember, Paul often says, I'm the author of this letter. I'm writing you with big letters and with it in my hand. But it's the words of the eternal Yahuwah who they're being rejoicing over, lacking no good thing. Matthew 25, 21. Messiah says, "Well done, good and faithful servant. You were faithful over a few things. I will make you ruler over many things. Enter into the joy of your Adonai, of your Lord." Okay. You were faithful over a few things. I'll make you ruler over many things. Enter into the joy of your Adonai, of your Yahuwah. And reward for obedience. Reward for obedience. Well done. You passed the test. You succeeded. But the interesting thing is, he can only share what is his to give, what is his to share. That's it. Otherwise, it's foolishness. How can you share something you don't own, you don't have? And he shares what is his to share. Psalm 50, verse 10 says, "For every beast of the forest is mine, and the cattle upon 1,000 hills." They're all his. He's the creator of all. He's the sustainer of all. And they all belong to him. 1 Corinthians 6, verse 19. 1 Corinthians 6, verse 19 says, "What? Don't you know that your body is the temple of the Ruach HaKodesh, the Spirit, the set-apart Spirit, which is in you, which you have of Elohim, and you are not your own?" So the Ruach is in us, which you have of Elohim, and we are not our own. We're no longer free agents. We've been signed to a monster contract, huge contract with benefits. For you are bought with a price. Therefore, glorify Elohim in your body and in your Ruach, in your spirit, which are Elohim's. You belong to him, and we can share in this joy that he offers us. That's the great thing. We can share in that joy because he offers it to us, and he can't offer what's not his to give. And we belong to him. He died for the sins of mankind, and we owe him a great debt of gratitude. No doubt, no question about that. So rejoice. Keeping his word creates the righteous standard that he has established, that he wants his children to walk in and to walk before him and be perfect, to know his truth, which will set the captive free. This he's done all for us. So when we read his word, as we meditate on his word day and night, we acknowledge the standard is high. The character that he requests is high. So remember that when we're trying to cheapen the gospel, when we're trying to cheapen grace, when we're trying to get off with the easiest way of understanding something. Well, it's got to mean this because I'm pretty lazy, and he understands my laziness. But we have to know that he expects the best from us. He expects the best. We're the students in the class who are raising our hand with the answers, and he looks at us as we are his unique children, and we gain favor with him, and he rejoices over us with that. So rejoice over him. Amen. Amen. And Abba, I just pray right now that your word went out, your words went out, Abba, and I just pray they find the fertile soil in our hearts and in our minds, a way of thinking, the way that we conduct ourselves, because our behavior is everything. We can say we're any number of things. We can say we're a can of corned beef. We can say anything that we are, but it doesn't mean that we are. What matters is what you declare for us, Abba, and that we walk in your ways and we derive pleasure and joy unspeakable by being of your children, Father, being of your faithful ones. And we give you thanks this day for all things in Yeshua's holy name. B'Shem Yeshua, B'Shem Yahusha. Amen.
Amen.
Amen. I wanted to, as we make the transition from myself to Michael, who's going to share next, I just want everyone to take a short break, stand up, shake your limbs out a little bit, maybe if you have to. I'm going to just talk to you about a couple important things. Okay. I just want to let you know that if you want to contact us, you can contact us through the live chat, but you can also send us the good tried and true method, which is mailing to us. If you'd like to mail anything to us, correspondence, or to let us know how we're doing, you can do it in this method, also with a proper postage stamp. It says Beth Tefilah, Tefilah, Messianic Congregation, Inc. That's BETH, right over my shoulder there. Beth Tefilah, Messianic Congregation, Inc. That's Post Office Box 170384, 170384, Ozone Park, New York, 11417. That's 11417. And you'll also see my home phone number right there as well, 718-366-5282. We're operating from Queens, New York, and we're grateful for this opportunity. I just pray that we're meeting needs. Week by week, we're going to get to a lot of amazing things, a lot of amazing truths that have been uncovered. And again, it's our duty. It's not how great or how smart we are. This is not copyrighted, so feel free to build upon this. I always tell people, if I do an expository type of message, which I generally do, write down the verses, look up and concord, build on it. You could double this study. You could double that study. You can make it yours. So be encouraged. Be encouraged, because we want you to know that you are loved, and that the eternal Yahuwah wants you to be the best that you can be. Be the best version of yourself, and that your characteristics, the way that you behave and conduct yourself, has to reflect, has to mirror that of Messiah. It has to. We must walk as he walked. And there was nothing about him with halos or floating above when he walked down the street. It could have been any one of us walking down the street. His behavior, his conversation, it could have indiscernible. That's why Yehuda had to kiss him in order to identify them, to arrest him. He was just one of the guys. Just one of the guys. Yes, he's one of the guys, but obviously we know that he was unique of Elohim, but he wants us to be unique of Elohim also. So we can't say, well, he's Ben Elohim, he's the son. Yes, but we are also sons and daughters of the Most High. And our destiny, when he comes back for us, is to see him as he is, because we will be like him. Okay, now what does that mean? Okay, there's a whole lot that means. Okay, so that's our information. I also wanted to mention that this week we're trying to be as positive and as up tempo as we can. But we learned a couple of days ago that a wonderful man had passed away, Gidon Nelson, otherwise known as Roger Nelson in the past. Gidon was a wonderful mentor of mine. Moshe Konachowski and Jeff Crew and a lot of folk. Dan and Ethel Chadwick worked with him. Katya K. Menelik. A lot of wonderful people came, and Nadine Zagovsky, and a lot of people he's touched with his life. And his wonderful wife had passed away about over 10 years ago, Shira, otherwise Carol Nelson, who was wonderful singer songwriter. And at the time, they had two children, Israel and Gail, and they used to do family musicals. Carol would write these musicals with little skits and such like that, and wonderful, and wonderful. And they had two children since then, and I just want to give him his props because he's a wonderful servant who would give you the shirt off his back because he was a big guy too, so it would fit you. So he was a wonderful guy, and he love to make him laugh, and I have good memories of him. Just wonderful, and keep his family in prayer. It was sudden, as far as I know. I'm still awaiting some details on that, but pray for the Nelson family, and for those of us who were effectively and beautifully influenced, that we continue to be steadfast and true to Yahuwah with that focus and mindset. A lot of wonderful people have influenced us. We stand on the shoulders of giants, and I just wanted to take that moment to give thanks to Gidon. And if this is news to you, but please contact the family. Let them know that you love them and that you love Gidon. Okay. So the little short rest period is over. We're going to go right back into the Word, and our friend here, Michael, you got to be ready. You got to be ready for him. He'll leave you in the dust. He's a great teacher, and he's capable of conveying a lot of information in a short amount of time. And if you give him a lot of time, he will do more so. So we're going to try to restrain him a little bit, but we want to give him free rein. And he started last week a wonderful teaching subject, which is to keep the Sabbath day holy. Keep the Sabbath day holy. I touched on some of the points today, and we will keep touching on these points because this is essential that you understand this day, that it's a holy day, it's a kadosh, set apart day. And why is it? It's not a day for more bagels and cream cheese and lox. You can have that stuff, of course, but it's not the focus. The focus is a right attitude, right behavior, and hearing the words that eliminate from us the tendencies to ease up on the pedal and to kind of coast, because he wants us to be at our best always. And again, Michael, I'm going to pass that to you.
All right. I'll sit here, Robert, correct?
You can sit right there, right in front of that.
All right. Greetings again, Shabbat Shalom.
Shabbat shalom.
Shabbat shalom.
This is Michael, or you can refer to me as Cobb, because this is, in a sense, sort of like the Corn on the Cob show, right? He goes first, he's corn, I go second, I'm the cob. So we just kind of joke about, because yesterday at Friday on Moshe's program is the Your Love of Arms to Israel is the Corn and Fig show. Well, today is the Corn on the Cob show. So greetings. Yes, now last week, I began a series in regards to keeping the Shabbat holy. Now, previously, right, we examined various scriptures regarding the verbal form of Shabbat. There are actually 73 of them, right, in the Tanakh, which define the meaning of Shabbat as a cessation or a ceasing from activity, rather than from resting from activity. There are also contextual uses of the noun form of Shabbat in the context of sin, as we'll see here. Now, I've outlined here before we go into continue from last week, the Sabbath being seen specifically in the context of sin. Okay, and so that's why we speak in regards to not resting, right, but actually ceasing or stopping. We went through some definitions from Vines last week. We can review those later. And we went through many of the 73 uses of the verbal form of Shabbat, which the context shows it means to stop or cease. It doesn't mean to rest. Right now, let's turn to some scriptures now that put the Sabbath in the context of sin. If we go to Isaiah, the book of Isaiah, chapter 56, Isaiah 56, verse 2, this for me is the clearest scripture that shows the context of the Shabbat in the context of sin. Isaiah 56, verse 2, blessed is the man that doeth this, and the son of man that layeth hold on it, that keepeth the Sabbath from polluting it, and keepeth his hand from doing any evil. Now, this is the concept here of Hebrew parallelism, where the eternal God uses two words there, and he puts them in a parallel there, meaning the same thing. So let me read that to you again. Isaiah 56, verse 2. Blessed is the man that doeth this, and the son of man that keepeth it, that keepeth the Sabbath from polluting it. How is that done? That keeping his hand from doing any evil. So here we see directly the Sabbath in the context of doing evil. Continuing, we go to Isaiah chapter 58, 2 chapters over, and we read in verse 13. Isaiah 58, verse 13. If thou turn thy foot away from the Sabbath, from doing thy pleasure on my holy day, and call the Sabbath of delight, the holy day of the eternal Lord honorable, and shall honor him, here we go, 1, not doing thine own ways, nor finding your own pleasure, nor speaking your own words. Again, we have first in the beginning, if you turn away your foot from the Sabbath, that's 1, and then not doing your own ways 2, finding your own pleasure 3, speaking your own words 4. We mentioned last week that when the eternal God uses phraseology in groups of 4, it's speaking about the whole corpus of an issue, the totality of it. Like, say, for example, you have in 1 Corinthians 1:30, Yeshua Messiah, Christ Jesus, is defined as wisdom, righteousness, sanctification, redemption. Those are the 4 categories there that define Messiah Yeshua, Jesus Christ Jesus, right? In all those 4 categories: wisdom, righteousness, sanctification, redemption. That's a definition scripture that we speak about. The same concept we have in Revelation 22:11. Revelation 22:11. 4 categories are mentioned which involve the whole corpus that is actually in the church or the ecclesia. Revelation 22:11. He that is unjust, let him be unjust still. That's 1. He that is filthy, let him be filthy still. That's 2. He that is righteous, let him be righteous. 3. And let him be holy, let him be holy still. 4. So we have here 4 categories here in the ecclesia, in the church itself here, right? And that's the totality. Everyone fits into one of these categories. Everyone fits into one of those categories. And this is a study which we'll get into later about the different categories that we have. But we go back here to Isaiah. So we see here that when we just saw in Isaiah 58 that we saw that not doing our own ways, speaking our own words, finding our own pleasure in regards to what? Go back to Isaiah 56 verse 2, right? That keepeth his hand, that keepeth the Sabbath from polluting it, and keepeth his hand from doing any evil. So Isaiah 58 verse 13 is speaking about turning our foot from the Sabbath. In other words, externally walking in a way that is inappropriate, that is evil. Okay. Also, not doing thine own ways, which would be doing our own evil, finding our own pleasure, which would be things that we would do that would be evil, pornography and such like, stealing, lying, or speaking your own words, words that will be evil words, words that stir up strife, words that are like cursing, words that are being negative and lying about someone, slandering someone, right? It's these words here in regards to the Shabbat we see here is that by not doing our own ways, not doing our own ways in regards to evil, as we saw in 56 verse 2. So keep in your memory banks, keep in your notes there, Isaiah 56 verse 2 and Isaiah 58 verse 13. These 2 scriptures right here encapsulate the meaning of the Shabbat in regards to evil, in regards to our ways. Now, we'll see later that, of course, the Sabbath is the 7th day. 7 is always continuous action. So the message is not that, well, just on this Sabbath day, this 24-hour period, don't do evil, don't speak your own words, don't go in your own way. But we know that we don't do evil 7 days a week, all the time, or continuously. So therefore, the Sabbath is given us 1 day out of the week as a weekly reminder in regards to the eternal, or God's reference in regards to sin. Now, something I found out long ago in my house that I bought long ago, the Sabbath definition, you could sum up as explaining this. This is a shirt here, you see here, and it says here, what part of thou shalt not didn't you understand? And then that's a message from God you see down here. You see here? Okay? You see here? Mm-hmm. What part of thou shalt not didn't you understand? We're talking, of course, about the, as we said before, the proscriptive commandments. The proscriptive commandments are those that thou shalt not, whereas the prescriptive commandments of that you shall do. Matter of fact, the fifth commandment incorporates the prescriptive, honor your father and mother. That's a positive thing, a prescription. Take 2 tablets and call me in the morning. The commandments about thou shalt not steal, commit adultery, you shall not covet, are all the proscriptives. And the Sabbath is the standard that says that what does thou shalt not mean, right? Because you'll see that constantly, that you'll hear no one's perfect, we all make mistakes, we're all sinners. Matter of fact, we had mentioned before that the thinking is that the 10 commandments are actually the standard for the ecclesia, for the church. Actually, really, they're not, because they're always contradicted by no one's perfect, we all make mistakes, we're all sinners, we're all just in the flesh, right? The Sabbath is given to shift back that refreshment of the Sabbath in regards to what does God, the eternal, mean when he says, thou shalt not. Again, what part of thou shalt not didn't you understand? When anyone in the world says stop or thou shalt not, don't do that, stop, we know exactly what it means. But apparently when God says it, when the eternal says it, he doesn't mean stop from sin. He means, because, no one's perfect, we all make mistakes, we're all under grace. Well, that is not true at all. And the Sabbath, again, is that reminder, that weekly reminder to us in regards to our everyday living, in regards to being without evil, being without sin. Now, our next reference in regards to the Sabbath in context of sin is in Numbers chapter 15. Numbers chapter 15. Turn to the book of Numbers. Let me go to chapter 15. My timer here. And we start in verse 22. Numbers 15, starting in verse 22. And we see here, and if you have erred and not observed these commandments, which the eternal spoken unto Moses, right? Even with the eternal commanded you throughout. Verse 24, if anyone commits a sin by ignorance without knowledge of the congregation, then an offering should be made. Okay, verse 25, the priest shall make the atonement. And verse 26, and I shall be given the individual, right? Verse 27, and if any soul sins through ignorance, the word there, shagat, means make an error, make a mistake, right? To make an error or make a mistake, something not intentional. We'll see the context as we continue. Verse 28, shall make an atonement for the soul, making again by the offering. Now, verse 30 of Numbers 15, but the soul that does what? Presumptuously, whether it be born on the land or a stranger, soul shall be cut off from among the people. Why? Because that person has despised the word of the eternal, the Lord, and has broken the commandment. And that soul shall be utterly cut off, and his iniquity shall be upon him. So what do we see here? In verse 30, but the soul that does what? Presumptuously. And the Hebrew is actually sins with a high hand is the actual word there. The King James uses presumptuously, but it's actually a high hand. The reason being is that you can see my hand. A hand is something that is external, whereas the heart or my lungs are something internal. You don't see my heart or my lungs. But a high hand means, in the sense that it's not just a low hand, but it's like up in the air, like in your face, in a sense, almost, right? That I'm doing something willfully and in your face, right? That kind of sin, right? This is the sin that's not forgiven, in contrast to the, I made a mistake, or I didn't know what I didn't know, I realized I was doing that. Now, what follows in Numbers 15 is an example exactly of this. You start in Numbers, and we go here, we just read in verse 30 about someone who does something presumptuously. because again, that individual has despised the word of the eternal. Verse 32. And while the children of Israel were in the wilderness, they found a man, what, gathering sticks on the Sabbath day. And they found him gathering sticks and brought them to Moses, and they put him in water till they found out what should be done with him. And verse 35, and the eternal Lord said to Moses, that man shall be put to death, and the congregation shall stone him with stones, right? And all the congregation stoned him with stones, and he died. Okay? So, we see here that the violation for breaking the Sabbath, we see here was penalty of death in the context of sin, all right, with a high hand in the face for everyone to see, not low, but everyone to see here. And he was gathering sticks, something that was not necessary to do on the Sabbath. And we'll see that breaking the Sabbath is analogous to sinning. The same thing concept we saw back in Isaiah 56:2 and 58:13. My own way, my own pleasure. I'm going to gather the sticks because I want to. I don't care if it's a Sabbath or whatever. I can do whatever I want. Lie, steal, cheat, fornicate, whatever it is that is contrary to the actual Tanakh, to the actual law there, I can do. And it's just presumptuously, not a mistake, right? So we see here the Sabbath in the context of sin. The context of sin. Our next example we'll see in Hebrews chapter 4. Hebrews chapter 4. Now, the context we'll be looking at immediately right now is verses 9 through 15, including verse 16, right? Which actually, we know from verse 9, it speaks about that therefore there remains a keeping of the Sabbath to the people of God, people of Elohim. Actually, we'll see that the actual little Sabbath day is not what's being spoken of here in context, right? But rather a way of life, right? A way of life of living without sin. If we go to the book of Hebrews, chapter 4, the book of Hebrews, chapter 4, and we'll begin in the immediate context. We have a further context, but right now we'll look at the immediate context because we have other passages to get to before we get there. Starting at verse 9, we see here, Hebrews chapter 4, therefore there remains a rest, therefore, to the people of God, people of Elohim. For he that is entered into his rest, he also has ceased from his own works as what? Elohim God did from his. This goes back, of course, to Isaiah 58 in regards to our own ways, speaking our own words in reference to what? Isaiah 56:2 in reference to doing evil, in reference to sin, right? That's the context in regards to we cease from our own works, right? And we are to do what? The works of our Creator, not our own personal sinful of the flesh works. Right, we stop and we do those. And the example as we have from Genesis chapter 2, as the eternal God ceased and stopped from his work, we see in Genesis chapter 2, verse 1, he ceased from his work. It was all done. It was completed, right? The same concept we see in chapter 4, the same chapter, we go back in verse 3. For we have, which I believe, do enter into ceasing or resting or stop. We'll discuss that word later. Although the works were finished from the foundation of the word. Verse 4, for he spoke in a certain place of the seventh day in this wise, and what? Elohim God did cease rest from the seventh day from all his works. So they were all finished. So he stopped, right? It was not that he, quote unquote, rested. He ceased from his activity. In the same way, we don't rest from sin. We cease from sin. That's the context we have in reference to Hebrews chapter 4. But continuing, there's more in this chapter. If we continue in Hebrews chapter 4, we see here it continues in regards to verse 12, in regards to the word of God, Elohim, and that's actually Yeshua, Jesus, in verse 14. Then in verse 15, for we have not a high priest which cannot be touched with the feeling of our infirmities, that's Yeshua, Jesus, but in all attempts was what? Tempted as we are, yet without sin. The context of the Shabbat in chapter 4 of Hebrews in verses 9 and 10 is in regards to sin. So he lists the issue in regards to 9 and 10 in regards to Shabbat. And then we have, let us labor to enter into that rest in verse 11. And then we have what? We have the help necessary to help us from doing so, from sinning. Because we have in verse 16, let us therefore come boldly to the throne of grace that we may find what? Mercy and find grace to help in time of need. In time of what? In regards to verse 15, yet without sin, to keep us from sinning. So that's why we have in verse 12 of Hebrews 4 that the word of God is what? Quick and powerful, sharper, and it continues, is a discerner of the thoughts and intents of the heart, of the thinking. So therefore, it goes right back to, you can do an act, but what was the initiation or the thinking of the individual? Was it a mistake? Was it intentional? Okay, our Creator here has the ability to discern our thinking and our hearts, right? And is able then to, we're able to come to him and find grace to help. Grace is power. 2 Corinthians 12:9, my grace is sufficient for you, for my power is made perfect in weakness. So therefore, he's able to now help us in regards to sin, what? That we may what? Verse 10, he that is entered to his ceasing of rest, he also has ceased from his own works. So therefore, the context here is in regards to Yeshua, our high priest, right? Who has the ability to look into our hearts and minds and see if we really do need help, right? What our attitude of mind was. And then we can what? Come boldly to the throne of grace, that power, that help, right? To find grace to help in time of need. And again, we'll expand on Hebrews chapter 4. Matter of fact, the context of the Shabbat in Hebrews 4 actually begins in chapter 3. It actually begins in chapter 3. Chapter 3. So we'll go there later. But right now, let's take a look at other passages in regards to the Sabbath in context of sin. Again, context of sin. We go to the book of John, chapter 5, the Gospel of John, chapter 5. We read starting in verse 1. And after this, there was a feast of the Jews, and Jesus went up to Jerusalem. And there was a sheep market and a pool, right? It had five high porches. And matter of fact, just as a note here, the part where it says here that waiting for the moving of the water, and an angel went down certain times into the pool and troubled the water. Okay, actually, the earliest manuscripts don't contain that part about the angel going into the water and moving the water so the water could be healed. But regardless, we continue, and a certain man was there 38 years, and Yeshua asked him, will thou be made whole? And the man says, okay, well, I have no one to, put me into the water. And Yeshua says in verse 8, what does he say? Rise up and take up thy bed and walk. And immediately, verse 9, the man took up his bed and walked, and the same day was the Sabbath. So we're putting John chapter 5 in context of the Sabbath, right, in verse 9. And verse 10, the Jews said, therefore, he was cured. It is a Sabbath day. It is not lawful to carry your bed. And he answered, of course, well, the man that told me, take up that bed and walk, told me, who healed me, take up my bed and walk, right? And the man that he did not know who it was, for Jesus, Yeshua had conveyed himself to a multitude being in that place. Verse 14 of John 5. Afterward, Yeshua, Jesus finds him in the temple and says to him, what? Behold, thou art made whole. Sin no more, lest a worse thing come upon you. Sin no more. And again, we see that the context of the Sabbath is in the context of sin. The action, the healing was done on Shabbat. Matter of fact, we'll see that the healing on the Shabbat is a type of spiritual healing, right? We'll talk about later, as we spoke about last week, the 2 tablets of the matching standard, right? If you're falling short, right? If you need to be healed from a wrong thinking, wrong behavior, the Sabbath is supposed to raise you up to the matching standard. If you're high-minded, you're full of yourself, right? You have an attitude. It's to bring you down to the standard. That's the purpose of Shabbat, to make it, again, to have it have its effect, rather than just going to church services and going home and just resting. There's nothing there regarding sin. There's nothing there regarding interpersonal relations. Again, the Shabbat violation was penalty of death. We see that from Exodus 31. It was the penalty of death. We saw that also. We just saw that from Numbers chapter 15, the man gathering sex on the Sabbath, right? And again, gathering sex on the Sabbath is not doing harm to anyone, but it represents sin. Non-Sabbath related work on the Sabbath is regarded as being sin. That's the whole point here. We continue and we go to chapter 9 of the book of John. Chapter 9 of the book of John. And we see again a reference in context of sin in regards to the Sabbath. John chapter 9, verse 1. And Yeshua, Jesus passed by, he saw a man which is blind from birth. And of course, who sinned, this man or his parents? And Yeshua answers in verse 3, neither this man, but that what the works of God, Elohim, should be manifest in him. Now, continuing, He tells him, he makes spits on his eyes, verse 6, go wash in the pool of Siloam. Verse 7, we see here that in this context, that the man had to do something. It wasn't just that he just healed the individual, but he says, what? Go and wash. Go and wash, right? The same as Nahum in 2 Kings, where he was to go, what? Wash 7 times in the pool. 7 times, continuous action, continuous washing. So we have the same concept here in regards to something that we do in regards to the removal, right, of this blindness, And of course, the neighbors saw him. Isn't this the one that begged? And said, it looks like him, right? And he answers in verse 11, well, a man told Yeshua, he made clay, and he told me to go wash, and I washed. Now, verse 14, and it was the 7th Sabbath day when Jesus, Yeshua, made the clay and opened his eyes. It was what? the Sabbath day. You get on to verse 25. And he answered and says, in regards to sin, because we have in verse 24, we know that this man is a sinner, right? The scribes and the Pharisees said. And verse 25, he says, whether or not he was a sinner or not, I was blind and now I see. Verse 30, and the man answered and said unto them, he did a marvelous thing that you know not who he is, and he hath opened my eyes. The concept of opening the eyes. We have someone that was born blind. And the concept now of removing the blindness. For us, it's an analogy here of spiritual blindness. I thought that we were just all sinners and we all make mistakes and we can't do anything right. And, no one's perfect. We're just all in the flesh. There's a thinking there. There's a blindness there in regards to the truth. But the Sabbath is designed to remove that blindness so that now you can clearly see. How do I know? We continue in the context. We just were at verse 30. Now we continue down to verse 39. And Jesus, Yeshua said, for judgment am I come into the world, that they which see not might see, and they which see might be made blind. Now, he's not talking about literal blindness, especially in that those who see might be made blind, that those who are not of the word, that are contrary to the word, they suddenly become physically blind. No, he's talking about spiritual blindness. In the same context, he's talking about those which do not see, though they're literally seeing, can now see and understand. The same concept that we speak about in regards to, you see what I'm saying? And you might not understand, but when you understand, what do you say? Oh, now I see what you're saying. Now, you don't literally see the words being said there, but it's a euphemism regarding that now I understand. It's the same thing as when we say, oh, now I hear what you're saying, right? The person heard the words for 3 months, a year, but now they understand. And now they say, now I hear what you're saying, or now I see what you're saying, right? The same thing is going here in regards to the spiritual aspect. Now, continuing, so, again, verse 39, that they which see not might see, and they which see might be made blind. Verse 40, and some of the Pharisees which heard him say these words, and he said to them, are we blind also? So we can say that these Pharisees, none of them was probably blind. But they're asking him about being blind. Now, verse 41, and Yeshua, Jesus said to them, if you were blind, you should have no sin. But now you say, we see, therefore your sin remains. Again, he's talking not about literal blindness, but spiritual blindness. And we see here, this is in the context. John chapter 9 is all in the context of the Sabbath day. So we see here spiritual healing from spiritual blindness. We continue in Luke chapter 4. Luke chapter 4, and we see the same context of the Sabbath in regards to blindness contextually. It doesn't specifically mention the word sin, but contextually is what it represents. We go to the book of Luke chapter 4. The book of Luke chapter 4. We start in verse 16. And he came to Nazareth, Yeshua, and where he had been brought up. And as the custom was, he went into the synagogue on the Sabbath day. This is the context of the Sabbath day, and stood up for to read. Okay. And there was, of course, delivered him the book of the prophet Isaiah. And when he had opened in his place, right, this is Isaiah chapter 61. And what does he read? Verse 18 of Luke chapter 4. Verse 18 of Luke chapter 4. The Spirit of the eternal Lord is upon me, because he hath anointed me to preach the gospel to the poor. He hath sent me to heal the brokenhearted. Now, the next statement here, to preach deliverance to the captives. Captive to what? The context is in regard to the context of sin. And continuing, and recovering of sight to the blind. What we just read before and saw in John chapter 9, the context of Shabbat in regards to blindness, in regards to sin, being released, having that spiritual availability of sight now and understanding, so that now you can turn from sin. And recovering of sight to the blind, to set at liberty those that are bereaved. Set at liberty. We know that sin is a type of bondage, but now what? We have now a release from that bondage to now have liberty, right? We see this concept we see in Romans chapter 6, say, for example, Romans chapter 6, verse 19 of Luke chapter 4, to preach the acceptable year of the Lord. And we have in verse 21, again, he says that this day is the scripture fulfilled in your ears. Which day is it fulfilled? The Sabbath day. We see back again in verse 16, it was the Sabbath day. So we see here the aspect of regards to deliverance of the captives, captive to sin, recovering sight to the blind, spiritual blindness in regards to the error, misunderstanding, and a set at liberty, those who are bondage to sin. So we see here, we have these contextual meanings here in regards to the Sabbath in context of sin. Now, I just want to go back and revisit Hebrews chapter 4. We spoke before about the mentioning of there remains a keeping of the Sabbath to the people of Elohim, people of God, and ceasing from our own works, right? So the thinking of many people is that, that just means the Sabbath day, the literal seventh day. There means a keeping of the Sabbath day in regards to going to Sunday, say, for example. But that's not the case of the context. We see in rest in Hebrews 3-4, the word rest in the King James Bible actually means to stop, to make, to cease, or desist. Now, the word rest is used there, say, for example, in the King James. The word actually means to stop, to make, to cease, or desist. To restrain a thing or person from something, to cease, leave off, have got released from sin, no longer stirred by its incitements and seductions. This is from Blue Letter Bible. The word rest has an intensive prefix added to it. So the word, I just read you the definitions of the word rest from the root word, but the word rest used in Hebrews 3 and 4 actually has an intensive to it, kata, an intensive to it, prefix, which means itself a causing to cease. This is seen in the context of Acts 7:49. The only place where this word, because there are several places used of this word in Hebrews 3 and 4. The only place where it's not used in Hebrews is in Acts 7:49. Of what? Elohim, God's dwelling place. Not where he's resting after a hard day's work. Say, for example, Genesis 1-2, because we know Elohim, God is not in need of any rest. We go to the book of Isaiah, chapter 40. Isaiah, chapter 40. We look at verse 28, Isaiah 40, verse 28. Hast thou not known, hast thou not heard, that the everlasting Elohim God, the Lord, the creator of the ends of the earth, fainteth not, nor is weary. He does not faint, nor is he weary. So therefore, he does not need to rest. But he did stop from his activity on the seventh day, as we saw from Genesis chapter 2, verses 1-3. He ceased, or he stopped from his activity in the same way that you and I are to cease and stop from sin. We just saw some references here in the New Covenant, in the Tanakh we saw, and we saw last week, again, 73 verbal forms of the word Shabbat, meaning to cease or to stop. We'll continue those later, actually, because I want, again, people to understand that, I didn't realize that Shabbat is in the context of stop or cease. Well, stop and cease in regards to what? Of course, the number one thing that the Eternal, our Creator, wants us to stop from doing is what? Sin. So therefore, we have the Sabbath in that context. But going here back to Hebrews chapter 4, we begin in chapter 3, actually, the context. Now, the context of the Sabbath rest in chapter 4, verse 9, is regarding to the wandering of the Israel after they refused to begin taking possession of the promised land. Okay, the rest in verses 8, 11, and 18 are not speaking of the Sabbath day, since they were already observing the Sabbath day from Exodus 16. Remember when they had left Egypt in Exodus 16? So we go to Hebrews chapter 3. And again, as I said, the verses 18 and 11, verse 11, so I swear in my wrath, they shall not enter into my rest. It should be actually ceasing or stopping, right? And verse 18, and to whom swore he that they should not enter into his ceasing or rest, but to them which believed not. We'll see the context of this rest or ceasing is in the context of faith. Those who were believing and those who are not believing. So we see the Sabbath interwoven with the concept of faith, right? Of faith. And we know that if we continue in Hebrews 11:6, without faith it is impossible to please him. For whoever comes to him must believe that he is, and then the critical point here, and that he is rewarder of them that diligently seek him. So diligently seek. The context is not diligently seeking and keeping the seventh day, but diligently keeping 7 days of being without sin. That's the diligently seeking we'll see. Now, continuing in Hebrews chapter 3. And again, it was because of what? Unbelief or being without faith. You'll see that in Hebrews 3, verse 12, verses 18 and 19. Verse 2. Matter of fact, let's read a couple of these. Hebrews 3:12. Take heed, brethren, lest there be in you what? An evil heart, thinking of unbelief, right? In departing from the living God, Elohim. And again, that's not just not observing the seventh day, but as a way of life. Verse 18, right? To whom swear he that they should not enter into his rest, but them which believed not. Verse 19. So we see that they could not enter in because of what? Unbelief. Again, the word in regards to faith, being without faith. Chapter 4, verse 2. Chapter 4, verse 2. So the context in verse 1. Let us therefore fear, lest a promise of being left of entering into his rest, any of you should seem to come short of it. Verse 2. For unto us was the gospel preached as well as to them. We have the good news of spiritual existence, and of course Israel had that of the promised land, to enter into the promised land, being out of slavery, right? That was their gospel, right? But the word did not profit them, not being mixed with faith of them that heard it. Again, faith, diligently seeking the eternal, diligently seeking God. They were not doing so. Verse 6 of chapter 4. Seeing therefore it remains that some must enter therein, that ceasing from sin, and they to whom it was first preached entered not in because of what? Unbelief. So when we talk about entering into the promised land, that's not the Sabbath day. That's entering into a new realm of existence, right? The land, the promised land, right? The land of Canaan, right? Continuing, verse 11 of chapter 4. Let us therefore what? Labor to enter into that enter into that rest, lest any person fall after the same example of unbelief. Not of keeping the Sabbath, but what? Of sinning, right? Going contrary to word. That's why you had those, during those 40 years, every male, every person over 20 years of age died because of the rebellion. He wiped out that whole generation there. And it wasn't because of the Sabbath. He said, go and take possession of the land. That's not the seventh day. And they said, no, because Joshua and Caleb came back, and they said, well, they are great giants and the Anakim and all these things like that. And they became afraid. And the Eternal says, go and take possession. Matter of fact, Joshua and Caleb, go take possession. They said, no. And then that was rebellion. God considered that rebellion against him. And says, you shall not enter into the rest, not the seventh day, right? But the taking possession of the land, as we are to take possession of the kingdom. You read in Daniel chapter 7, the saints possess the kingdom. That's our final rest. That's our final promised land that we're looking for. We're strangers and pilgrims here, right? The 40 years, the Israelites were strangers and pilgrims until they got to the promised land. Right now, we know from Hebrews that we are strangers and pilgrims waiting for what? Our inheritance in the promised land, which is what? Eternal life, the heavens and the earth, right? The heavens and the heavens, the universe, all things, the entire universe, all things. So we see here that the context is not the seventh day in regards to verse 4, as we'll continue in the context. So the rest in verses 11 and 18 are not speaking about the seventh Sabbath day, since they were already observing it in Exodus 16. And that includes also the 40 years of wandering, right? You had the death, true, of those 20 years and older, but you had those now who were being taught by Moses, right, who didn't have the spirit of rebellion, the children, and they got older there, and they were observing the Sabbath, okay? This context is the rest in context of the gospel, right? In Hebrews 4, we just read in verse 2 here, for the gospel was preached to them as to us. Now, continuing, right? Those believing are already now entering into that rest by faith. Although the literal Sabbath day rest was accomplished in the first recorded literal seventh day in verses 3 through 4. Verses 3 through 4 of Hebrews chapter 4, right? His works were finished from the foundation of the world. And verse 4, and what? Elohim God did what? He did cease. That word there actually means a ceasing or a cessation from the seventh day from his work. So the seventh day was already accomplished, really, right, in terms of its literal application, right? It presently remains that others must enter into this rest or ceasing, living the sin-free life through faith, because the inheriting of the land under Joshua was not the rest, because even 400 years later, David is still speaking of the need for some to enter into that rest. That's Psalms 95. Psalms 95. That's what you have here when you see in verses 5 through 8. 5 through 8. And again, in this place, if they shall enter into my rest, therefore it remains that some must enter therein, to whom it was first preached, they entered not in because of unbelief. And again, verse 7, he limiteth a certain day, saying, in David, right? In David, right? Today, so long after so long a time, as it is said, if you today, if you hear his voice, harden not your hearts. For if Joshua had given them rest, that was 400 years before, right after Moses died. And what? Joshua shall take them into the promised land. Joshua, of course, being a type of Yeshua or Jesus, that entering now we use, because again, the law, the external standard of the law doesn't take us in, but the spiritual aspect. So therefore, Moses doesn't take the people into the promised land, the external aspect of the law, but the internal perspective of Joshua, Yeshua, right? For us, Jesus, you know, for those who are not familiar with the terms there, the Hebrew idiom there, Hebrew word in regards to Yahuwah or Yeshua, right? So therefore, we see, right, in verses 5 through 8, that it's a quote here, and again, that David is speaking of this rest. But again, if the rest was accomplished, which again, under Joshua, they went into the promised land, and eventually under David, of course, they did, you know, finally now vanquish all the enemies there. But again, that was 400 years later. And then we have verse 9. Therefore, there remains a rest to the people, what? Of God or Elohim. Verse 10, for he that is into his rest, what? He ceases from his own works, as what Elohim or God did from his. So we see here, the seventh day of the Sabbath is not even the context here, right? It's not the context. The only context we have is back in verses 3 and 4 in regards to the seventh day, when you know, God is eternal, when he ceased and he stopped. But all the context of entering into the promised land, right? Those that did not enter because of unbelief, has nothing to do literally with the seventh day. It wasn't done on the seventh day. They were resting, they were ceasing, they were not working on the seventh day in regards to that inheriting of the land there, right? So these were the other days, right? So we see here that the context of Hebrews chapter 4, verse 9 is not the literal seventh day, right? But what? A way of life, seeking and what? Laboring to enter into, right, that rest or that ceasing from sin. That's the context we have here in Hebrews chapters 3 and 4. So we see the sin context of these verses that we just went over here. So now, as we referenced in the past, you know, each of the commandments have a sociological function, which are all summarized by what? By the horizontal. Again, horizontal meaning this way in regards to one another. I have Robert over here. I have other brethren here, right? In regards to sociological function. We spoke about here later, and we'll get more in detail about, there's something that we call the 4-6 principle, the 4-6 principle. And many of you have heard of it. The first 4 commandments teaches how to love God or Elohim. The last 6 teaches how to love neighbor. Okay? Actually, that's actually incorrect. Right? The Bible does not teach that. The Bible does not teach that I can adultery, steal, murder, lie, but I love God Elohim because I keep the first 4 commandments. And that's an abomination, right? What do we have in 1 John 5:3? This is the love of God Elohim, that we what? Keep his commandments. Not his first 4 commandments, but all of his commandments, right? All of his commandments, right? That's the context. So, therefore, the fourth commandment, as we saw, has a sociological function. And as we just reviewed, that the context is in regards to sin. That's why it was the penalty of death. If you do not cease from sin, the soul that sins shall die. Ezekiel 18, the soul that sins shall die. Right? 1 John 3, verses 8 through 10. Right? He who sins, what? That person that sins is of the devil. Right? And this is manifest the children of Elohim God and the children of the devil. Right? So, again, we see the context in regards to sin. And again, that shows the sociological function. That right there shows the sociological function. Again, now the first great commandment listed as of primary importance to the second great commandment. The first great commandment is about loving the eternal, all your heart, all your soul. And the second great commandment is loving neighbor as self. This is where people actually take the concept of that, okay, yeah, the first great commandment and the second one, then that means then therefore that the first great commandment is commandments 1 through 4. And the second one of commandments, what? 5 through 10, right? That's something that people have created in their minds, but is not the truth. For we see that the second great commandment actually absorbs all of the commandments 1 through 4. It absorbs commandments 1 through 4. We know this from example, Romans chapter 13. Again, this is a quick review from last week. Romans chapter 13, where we see here, and again, this review is necessary because, again, there are some new things here that people haven't heard before that they need to hear, and we need to refresh the mind. Matter of fact, that's what in regards to the Shabbat, remember it talks about, and he was refreshed. Well, there needs to be that renewing of the mind, that refreshing, because if you just hear these messages once or twice, you'll forget. But if you hear it constantly, over and over again, you say, wait a second, I thought Sabbath meant stop. And I thought that, that there were these other Sabbath scriptures here in the context, Isaiah 56 and 58, Hebrews 4, 3 and 4, John chapter 5, John chapter 9, Luke chapter 4. And the context is the Sabbath, yes, but it's in the context of sin. Well, that's something I wasn't aware of. I wasn't thinking, and I need to review that. I'm hearing it over and over again. Again, repetition is an excellent teacher. Repetition is an excellent teacher. So we go back to Romans chapter 13. We start in verse 8. Oh, no person anything, but to love one another, for he that love another hath fulfilled the law. Just one quick insert here. In the King James and in many other translations, it says, oh, no man anything. Now, the word there used is anthropos. Anthropos. It's the same word used in the Septuagint in regards to man. But now in Genesis, we go back to the Hebrew. Go back to Genesis chapter 5. Let me just clear up this point real quick. Genesis chapter 5. This is the book, Genesis chapter 5, verse 1. We'll read verses 1 and 2. This is the book of the generations of Adam. Quote unquote, people say that as being man. Actually, it's not. In the day that God, Elohim, created man, in the likeness of God made he him. Verse 2. Male and female created he them, and he blessed them, and he called their name what? He called their name Adam. Adam. Not that the man himself was just Adam. The woman, female also was Adam. And this is the word here. And you see in the Greek, when it refers to anthropos, it's speaking about this context here in regards to being Adam, the man, quote unquote. But it's actually human being, because again, Genesis 5, verse 2, male and female, he created he them and blessed them and called their name. The female is Adam just as much as the man is Adam. So that was just a quick insert here. If you want to reference as to why, when it says man, I thought, people is our creator sexist, something like that. Actually, it truly is a mistranslation, because it should be any human being or any person. Because Genesis, again, 5 verses 1 through 2 show that both male and female are, quote unquote, anthropos, or quote unquote, man, or Adam. They're both Adam. So that was just a quick little insert there. You can put that in your notes for future reference, because sometimes I make a mistake and read the word man there. In other words, it's not referring to the women, but it's actually referring to both. So we go back to Romans chapter 13. Oh, no person, okay, human being, male, female, anything. Of course, the context, of course, makes sense. The context actually brings it out. But to love one another, for he that loveth another, that person that loves another, has fulfilled the law. For this, The commandments: adultery, murder, stealing, false witness, coveting. And if there be any other commandment, the first great commandment fits in the category of any other commandment. Is briefly comprehended in this. You would think that, well, it was comprehended in the first great commandment, right? The first great commandment should be the king, and the second great commandment should be the queen. You would think, the king, the queen. But actually here, the queen, or the second great commandment, is briefly comprehended in this, saying what? Namely, thou shalt love thy neighbor as thyself. Well, that's the second great commandment. And why? Because love, agape, does no ill or harm to a neighbor. Therefore, agape love fulfills the law. So we see that the eternal, our creator, is saying that the true worship of him is how we relate to one another. It is not how we vertically, worship him, right? It's actually focused on the horizontal. Again, it is not the first 4 commandments of how we worship him. And I can say I worship the eternal while I'm committing adultery, lying, and stealing, right? Actually, the horizontal relations of interpersonal relations are keeping commandments 1 through 4. Commandments 1 through 4 are actually a safeguard, a test guard. We saw before in regards to the second commandment. We read in reference, the second commandment in Deuteronomy 5, but the full definition or expansion of that goes into chapter 4 of Deuteronomy, where really only the second commandment is being referenced in regards to hearing the words, and not making an idol. Because psychologically, people will follow something better that they see rather than what they hear. They tend to forget what they hear, right? But if they see something, actually the words actually diffuse out, and then they follow them what they see. And the warnings in the chapter 4 of Deuteronomy are not to follow what you see in regards to anything else, but follow my words. You hear my voice, right? That's why we have the darkness and the clouds there, because all you heard was words. It's like having 2 lifelines, right? You have a lifeline of what you see, and of what you see. The tendency is to go for what you see. What the eternal does is that he removes the lifeline of something that you see, and there's only one lifeline left: his words. So therefore, the words of life are which we gravitate to, rather than, again, the image of man or beast or ideology or anything contrary, making another God, another Elohim. Right? That's the concept that we have in regards to the understanding, in regards to the commandments. And again, the point is explained further in the New Testament scriptures regarding interpersonal relations. Matthew 7:12, what to do to another in accordance with universal general revelation. Right? Whatever you would want someone to do to you, do to them. For this is the law, the Torah, and the prophets. Right? It is not the first great commandment, but it incorporates the first great commandment. You cannot keep the first great commandment without keeping the second great commandment. It is impossible to do. Commandments 1 through 4 give in a sense, the authority and the aspect of respect. Like, say, for example, the third great commandment: you shall not take the name of the eternal in vain. Name in scripture represents a person's teaching, his perspective, taking it for a vain reason, a vain purpose, like not teaching it, or from Deuteronomy 4:2, adding to it or subtracting to it, perverts the meaning of it, because we see in Deuteronomy 4:2, right, you do not add to or take away from that you may keep and observe these things. In the same way, the fourth commandment, by adding or subtracting the aspect, by adding the concept of rest and taking away the concept of stop or cease, perverts and now renders the Sabbath commandment of none effect. Simply resting has nothing to do with cessation from sin. It now makes it null and void. The same concept we see in Matthew 15, right? In regards to the fifth commandment, right? The Korban rule. Instead of supporting your parents, give it to the temple to take care of us guys, the scribes and the Pharisees, the Sadducees, specifically, the priests, right? So we have in that context that the Sabbath now, again, what does it say in Matthew, Hebrews 15:7? You make it of none effect. It no longer has the effect that it is supposed to have. Again, Shabbat was penalty of death. Even in the old covenant, stealing itself wasn't penalty of death. Bearing false witness wasn't penalty of death in itself. Coveting wasn't penalty of death. Who's going to know unless you tell someone, right? You wouldn't know. But yet a man we saw from Numbers 15 gathering sticks was put to death, was doing harm to no one, yet penalty of death. So again, we see that all the scriptures I read before to you earlier in Isaiah 56, 58, we saw from Hebrews 4, John 5, John 9, that the context in regards to sin, in regards to Shabbat. And we must cease from sin, our own ways, our own works, speaking our own ways, our foot doing our own thing, right? In context, what? Of Isaiah 56, 2. Sabbath in regards to doing evil. That is the Sabbath ceasing, the Sabbath rest, if you so, that we must have. And so therefore, how important is it? We'll see grammatically that it was what? No other commandment do we have there. It says what? To remember or to guard. In Exodus chapter 20, we have what? Remember the Sabbath day to keep it holy. In Deuteronomy 5, we have what? Remember the Sabbath day to keep it holy. He doesn't say remember not to commit adultery, not to steal, not to bear false witness. But he uses what? Remember and to guard what? The seventh day. Why? Because it's the reminder, the standard that sets the standard, especially for the what? We said before, proscriptive laws. Not steal, not lie, not commit adultery. Again, the Sabbath answers this here. What part of thou shalt not didn't you understand? Well, you know what? He gave us a help, the fourth commandment, to help us as a weekly reminder of ceasing from sin, to understand thou shalt not. It doesn't mean that, well, no one's perfect. We all make mistakes. We're all sinners. We have grace to cover us. Yeshua and Messiah on the cross. No. When we speak about not committing adultery, not stealing, not lying, those are actually commandments. Those are penalty of death, as is breaking the fourth commandment, because non-Sabbath work on the seventh day is analogous to sinning. That's the aspect of it. In regards to our Creator, it was we have the 6 days of creation. And mind you, we'll see as we go back to, if we can go back to Hebrews chapter 4, it says, now, a lot of you that have the King James, it says, let us labor to enter into that rest. Actually, the correct translation is give diligence. Spudeomai is the verb there. Spudeomai, to give diligence, enter into that rest. And we have, remember in Genesis 1, we have a progression of development, right? And an increasing the progression of development. First, now for days 1 through 3 are what? Separating and bounding. We have the first day, day 1, separating of what? Day from light. The second day, we have the separation of the waters from the waters of under, from the waters above, creating the heaven. We have in day number 3, the earth coming up out of the waters, separating from the waters, and now non-living, non-sentient life, plants, the vegetation that we have in those days. Now, days 4 through 6 actually mirror those days there, now in giving what? Life, especially days, particularly days 5 and 6. So we have day 1, we have the separating now of light and darkness, and now in day 4, the mirror day of it, we have now what? The greater light, the sun, and the less light, the moon, are now assigned to the functions, light of night and darkness. Then in day 2, the separation of the waters from above and below, we have what? In day 5 now, the birds flying in the heaven, and the fish, the aquatic life, now what? In the waters under the earth. So now we have, again, that progression of development there. So in day 3, we have the separation of the what? The earth out of the waters, being released from that bondage of being drowned, that watery grave. And now we have plant life, yes, but then what? In the mirror day chapter of day 6, we have now what? The peopling of the earth with quote unquote man, human beings, and the land dwelling animals. So we see here a progression, a slow progression of separating and bounding, and then increasing into now giving life, a development we have here. So therefore, when we go back to Hebrews chapter 4, and it speaks about, let us therefore labor to enter into that rest. In verse 11, Hebrews 4:11, let us labor, it should be give diligence to enter into that rest, ceasing or stopping. We see here laboring is what? Is that day of progression throughout the 6 days of creation until we get to that final part there where we have now ceased from sin. So we see a development of the 6 days. right? So therefore, that's why it says 6 days you shall labor, or you may labor the 6 days. Spiritually, he's talking about the laboring of that development point. But the 7th day is something that's why we don't observe the 6 days. We observe the 7th day. The 7th day is the keystone by which we have the continuous action. The same context in regards to Shabbat, in regards to, say, for example, the 7th day of unleavened bread. 7th day of unleavened bread. It is called the 7th day of unleavened bread. It is not called the feast of putting out leavened bread. Unleavened bread was supposed to have already been put out before the first day. And now we know from 1 Corinthians 5:8 that malice and wickedness in regards to the leaven, and in regards to the unleavened bread, which we are partaking of during the 7 days, was what? Sincerity and truth. Now, there's not a progression there in the days of unleavened bread. The 7th day is the first day, and the 7th day is what we are to observe. The first day and the 7th day give the boundaries, and the 7th day is the continuous action. So it is not the point that we say literally within our life that except for the 7th day of unleavened bread, we're have sin and we're putting out sin continuously. No, the 7th day is that it's already been put out, because mind you, you're not putting out leaven during those 7 days. It's already been put out. You're taking in the unleavened bread, and we know from Exodus 13:9, what does it represent? That the Lord's eternal's law may be in your mouth. That's the actual way to keep out the leavening from entering back in. So we see there a continuous action. Continuous action. Again, we have other holy days that have an aspect in regards to 7, which we'll get into at a later time. Yeah, okay, I got 2 minutes here. Am I going to finish on time, or should I get a little bit longer?
Well, it's 2:21. I'd say a couple minutes.
How many more?
A couple.
How many is a couple?
5.
Okay, 5 in addition to what I have here. Okay, I'll add another 5 here. So, sorry about that, brother. So now continuing this aspect here, I just want to continue here from last week as a memory, because I read references from Vines last week in context of Shabbat, the verbal form meaning to cease or to stop. Well, I want to continue giving some more of those. So you just hear them over and over and over, and you see that's why Vines and the lexicons say that, wait a second, the Sabbath means to stop. It doesn't mean to rest. I heard this guy on YouTube, there's 73 of them, and he read them over and over and over. You really didn't see a context where really rest could be really used, really. So therefore, our understanding of Shabbat must change. So therefore, let us continue with some of these references in regards to Shabbat, in meaning ceasing. Let's continue here. Jeremiah, chapter 31. Jeremiah 31:36. If these ordinances depart from me, saith the eternal Lord, then the seed of Israel shall cease from being a nation before me forever. Not rest from being a nation. The context makes it clear that they shall cease or stop being a nation. That's the verbal form of Shabbat. The verbal form of Shabbat. Jeremiah 36:29. Jeremiah 36:29. And thou shalt say to Jehoiakim, king of Judah, thus saith the eternal Lord. Thus saith the eternal Lord. Pardon me, brother. I just gotta reset my alarm here. Okay, thank you. Yes. Jeremiah 36:29. Jeremiah 26:39. Regarding Jehoiakim, right? Thou hast burned this roll, saying, why hast thou written therein, saying, the king of Babylon shall certainly come and destroy this land, and shall cause to cease from thence man and beast. Not to give them a rest, not to cause them to relax. That is not why Babylon is coming, to give the people a rest. They're coming to slaughter and to take into captivity, so that there will be no more people left in the land. Again, that's man and beast. The context is not rest, from Jeremiah 31:36. Jeremiah 48:35. Moreover, I will cause to cease in Moab, says the Eternal, him that offereth in the high places, and to him that burns incense to what? God's Elohim. He's not going to give them a rest from committing idolatry. He will cause them to what? To cease, to stop. Lamentations 5:14. Lamentations 5:14. The elders have ceased from the gate, and the young men from their music. Again, because of the captivity, because of the issues and the famine that came on in the book of Lamentations, right? The elders, he didn't give them a rest from the gate and the young men from their music. Take 5, take a break. So no, that's not why. He caused the music and the joy to cease. Verse 15, the next verse in Lamentations 5. The joy of our heart is ceased. Shabbat. Our dance is turned into mourning. There is no joy of heart. Read the book of Lamentations, and you see there is no joy to be had in the book of Lamentations at all. Zero, nada, nothing. He causes it what? To stop or to cease, not to rest. Not to rest. The context makes it clear. Again, we're going over these so people can understand the context of Shabbat. The context of Shabbat. Ezekiel 6:6. Ezekiel 6:6. In all your dwelling places, the cities shall be laid waste, the high places shall be desolate, and your altar shall be laid waste and made desolate, and your idols may be broken, and cease, and your images be cut down, and your works may be but abolished. The context is not rest. It is to cease the idols from being there. Ezekiel chapter 12. Ezekiel 12:23. Ezekiel 12:23. Tell him, therefore, thus says the eternal Elohim, I will make this proverb to what? Cease, and they shall no more use it as a proverb in Israel. But say unto them, the days that are at hand, the effect of every vision. The context there of the proverb is that it stopped, not give it a rest, so that it can then come back. It can take a rest, and you rest, you restore your vigor, and then you return back to doing what you did before, even with even more vim and vigor. But what does he say here? He causes it to stop, to cease, that it is no longer being done. Ezekiel chapter 16:41. Ezekiel 16:41. And they shall burn thine houses with fire and execute judgments upon thee in the sight of many women. And I will cause to what? To cease from playing the harlot. And thou shalt give no hire anymore. If hiring of the harlot was to continue, he wouldn't give it ceasing. He would then give it a rest. But the context that he gives them, her hire shall be what? No more. It means that he causes that harlot, that aspect, to cease or to stop, not to rest. That is Ezekiel 16:41. Ezekiel 23:27. Thus will I make thy lewdness to cease from thee, and thy whoredoms from the land of Egypt. And thou shalt not lift up their eyes unto them, nor remember Egypt anymore. The context is not resting from the lewdness of the whoredom, but to cease or to stop. 26, Ezekiel 26:13. 26:13. And I will cause the noise of thy songs to cease, and the sound of thy harps shall be heard. What? No more. When you have there no more, it doesn't mean that, a rest. It means that no more means it is stopped. Not that take a interlude, take a 30-minute break, rest, and then come back and do it again. No, the context is clearly what? To cease or to stop. Ezekiel 30:13. Ezekiel 30:13. At Taphanes also the day shall be darkened when I shall break there the yokes of Egypt, and shall pomp of her strength shall what? Cease in her. So a cloud shall cover her, and they shall go into captivity. If you're being brought into captivity, right, your pomp, right, and your strength will cease. It will not rest. Again, there's more of these, but any one of you can continue. Again, the Strong's number is Hebrew 7673. 7673. You can look it up in Strong's Concordance, or you can put Blue Letter Bible on your phone, and Blue Letter Bible has all the Strong's numbers there, and you just press on one of them, 7673, and all 73 references will come up. And this is critical. You must do it for yourselves to know. You can hear it, but a lot of times it just bounces off the ear and goes in one ear and goes out the other. But you have to have these and keep these things in memory, which we'll see later, that it's by keeping these things in memory that we have salvation. So, brethren, in conclusion, the seventh day, the Sabbath, ceasing, not resting. There's not the context of Shabbat. Ceasing is stopping in reference to what? The most important thing that could be stopping from sin, the sin lifestyle. We'll see there are Sabbath scriptures that speak about this, right? For example, 1 Corinthians 15, 34. Awake to righteousness and sin not, for some have not the knowledge of Elohim, knowledge of God. The knowledge of God in Elohim is that context is what? That you cease from sin. Well, I'm able to do so. I'm able to do that. Yes, you are. Especially in the aspect in regards to the spirit that we have our Creator actually dwelling in us to help us. The context we saw before from Hebrews chapter 4, the word of God is powerful, quick, discerner of the thoughts and intents of the heart. Verse 16, let us come boldly to the throne of grace to find what? Grace to help in time of need. So therefore, there's no excuse. It is a sure thing. First John 3, 3. He that is pure as that one is pure. 1 John 3:7. Children, do not be deceived. He that is righteous as that one is righteous. Verse 6. He that abides in him sinneth not, and he cannot sin because he is what? Born of God, born of the eternal. Verse 9 of 1 John. The same concept that he who abides in him does not sin because what? His seed remains in him. So we see that sin, it is possible to put sin out of your lives, to keep it out from lives. And we'll go into the context in regards to internal sin, external sin. Sin unto death, sin not unto death. There are different categories of sin. There's external, there's internal, there's intentional, there's non-intentional. So we'll see in context, what is the sin in reference to, so you can understand, because people think that, well, I had this thought in my head, so I sinned. Actually, that's not necessarily true, because again, what we take every thought captive to the obedience of Christ. 2 Corinthians 10:5. We take it captive to obedience. Well, if you take something captive, you haven't put it to death, but you're now, in a sense, what? You're confining it so that it can now get out and now externalize. So you confine it, you keep it internal, and you wrestle with it till you nullify it, to make it of none effect. That thought that I had about hatred, lust, envy, greed, murder, whatever it might, revenge, whatever it might be, right? It comes into the mind. Coming into the mind is not sin, but now how you manage it, the initiation point, is critical. It is critical. We'll get back to this in Matthew chapter 5, but it is written, but I say to you, the initiation point. So therefore, right, thoughts coming in there, okay, God wants to say, okay, how are you going to handle that? Keep mulling on it, keep being angry, and then what? Go into, right, that actual sin aspect. We see that in the book of Ephesians chapter 4. Right, the book of Ephesians chapter 4. Let not the sun go down on your wrath. Be angry, but sin not. Right? Anger itself is not sin, but sin not. Don't let it go down on your what? And the word there is a word there that means going outside of your anger. So that now, right, lest you give place to the devil. So, again, we'll continue the series next week. But again, Shabbat, think in regards to what? Ceasing from sin. Ceasing from sin, not resting. That's the point I want you to get across in this presentation today. The Shabbat in regards to cessation or ceasing from sin. We saw references here. We'll see more next week. So until next week, right? Have a happy Shabbat. And again, ceasing without sin is every day of the week, not the seventh day. You cannot sin 6 days and then not sin the seventh day and say you're keeping the Sabbath. Matter of fact, if you sin at all, you're not a Sabbath observer. A Sabbath observer is one that does not sin, right? Cease from sin, to cease or stop. We saw the references there. So thank you, brethren. We'll see you next week.
Amen. Amen. So again, I think enough has been presented so far this day to chew on and to look back and take notes. We really want to get this across to you, that there's very important things that are kind of glossed over or not fully considered. We need to break off the influence of shadim, of dark influences, because we wage not a war against flesh and blood. I've got nothing against anyone here who might disagree with me, but we wage war against the spiritual powers, and there's a lot of darkness, and we need to claim the victory that's been given to us. He's overcome the world, and he said that the Torah is the way that keeping Torah is the way that we show our love for him, and that his Torah, so his commandments, his Torah, his teachings, his influence over us is not a burden. It's not a burden. It's a liberty. And we have overcome this world if we follow him. So we need to consider these things. As I said, quoting Paul, Shaul says, prove all things, test all things. Reject the bad, reject the things that are proven to be wrong or whatever, and accept that which is good. And we do that with our teachings here as well. test these things. Look at the context. Look at what's actually being said, regardless of what you've been taught, regardless of how many decades you've believed it was one way and not the other way. Prove it. Show yourself approved. We have to be showing ourselves to be approved to the Most High and to each other. So again, thank you for joining us this day. And I'd like us all to turn in our Siddur as we conclude this portion here. Turn to the back. This page here, third from the back. Congregational response after Torah reading. One more. Oh. There it is. Okay. Okay. This is the Torah which Moshe placed. We'll read this responsibly, okay, guys? Okay, this is the Torah which Moshe placed before the children of Israel. It is in accord with the Eternal's command by the hand of Moshe. Together, a tree of life it is for those who take hold of it. Blessed are the ones who support it. Its ways are ways of pleasantness. All its paths are peace. Long life is in its right hand. And its lift are riches and honor. The Eternal was pleased for the sake of his righteousness to render the Torah great and glorious. Amen. It is great. It is glorious. When the ark rested, Moshe would say, "Return, O Eternal Yah, to the myriads of Israel's families. Arise, O Yahuwah, to your resting place, you and your mighty ark, and your place of stoppage, of cessation, you and your mighty ark. Clothe your priests with righteousness, and may those who have experienced your faithful love shout for truth, shout for joy. For the sake of your servant David, don't delay the return of your Mashiach. I give you good instruction. Do not forsake my Torah." Amen. Do not forsake. We should not be forsaking anything in this life that is of substance, that seeks to help us, that seeks to give us and enhance our lives. So again, we say Shabbat Shalom to you. And again, next Shabbat at 11 a.m., we will be on live and ready to go. So again, we thank you for your patience, and we give thanks to the Eternal Most High. And we give thanks, Regina, with our song.
Okay. Well, this is what I had here.
It's still on there.
Yeah. This is what I had here. Following next. No?
Yeah. Amen.
Amen.
So let me just look over here. 1 second. I'll just go through my Siddur. And let us just close in prayer. Abba, we thank you once again for making your word available to us, that we have access to it. Some have more sophisticated devices by which to gather the information and to do the research, but we all have the capabilities, Abba. You've given us peace in a sound mind. May the Eternal bless you and keep you. Make the Eternal make his face to shine upon you and be gracious unto you. And may the Eternal Yahuwah lift up his countenance upon you and give you peace, the peace that surpasses our understanding, to guard our hearts and our minds in Messiah Yeshua. So we pray, Father, that you would bless us and put your name, your sign and seal of ownership and your teaching upon us all this day. And we give you thanks for all things in Yeshua's holy name.
Amen.
Countenance upon you and give you peace, and give you peace. The Lord will give his face to shine upon you, and be gracious, and be gracious. The Lord be gracious, gracious unto you.
Yivarechecha Yahuwah v'yishmerecha. Ya'er Yahuwah panav elecha v'yichamnecha. Yisa Yahuwah panav elecha v'yasem lecha shalom. And we wish you all a Shabbat Shalom. As we get to know more and more about Shabbat, we can appreciate it more and enjoy it more, and its impact upon us will be greater and greater. So we give you thanks again for tuning us in, and we give you thanks, and we give thanks to our wonderful Creator for all things we give you. We give Him blessed thanks and praise. And have a Shabbat Shalom, everyone. Bye-bye now.
Shabbat Shalom.
Shabbat Shalom. Are you sure you want to end the stream? No, let me go back on.
What was the last page you were in the Siddur, Robert? You had turned to? What was that page?